Chapter 1648. The blurry white light seemed to be a phenomenon formed by a mass of chaotic air born from the void itself. If one used their eyes to identify it, they would recognize it as a ray of light. If one used their senses to touch it, they would be able to perceive its essence, a mass of chaotic rules. It wanted to evolve something, but just as it was about to evolve something, it froze in place and did not do anything. In the dark space, dark blue and green rays of light shone through the walls and under their feet. They merged with the light that belonged to the rules, causing the space to become even darker. The rays of light were messily rubbed together and then casually thrown into this space like a ball of garbage. The eyes that captured the light could vaguely see some fragments that were formed by rules and concepts floating in the air. It was a wasteland and empty space. There was nothing to speak of. It's been a long time. Are we not there yet? Yin Nuoxing muttered to himself. He stood up from the ground and paced around the platform. This platform had been rising for more than half an hour. The surrounding space expanded to a certain extent and stopped expanding. The pillars could no longer be seen. The only pillar left in his line of sight was the one under his feet. It was constantly rising, and he did not know when it would reach the end. Looking down from the edge of the platform, he could no longer see anything. Only the pillar itself surrounded the darkness below and rose up alone. The faint light emitted by the walls thousands of miles away made the darkness and loneliness even more intense. This was the domain of chaos. This space was constructed by it. He had no way of knowing what it looked like. Observing himself from an independent perspective, he could tell that he was indeed rising along with the pillar. The long distance in the middle was not used to deceive his senses and cognition. This was the only thing he could be sure of. As for how big this space was, he did not know. He could not see it. I wonder how Hui is doing. 2 hours should be. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and muttered to himself in his heart. See you, and Qing Huang shouldn't have caused any trouble for Yuan Ji, right? Little Angel glanced at him and said lightly, You must have confidence in them. I have confidence in Qing Huang. I also have confidence in Siyu. Confidence in her ability to cause trouble. Little Angel, that girl was indeed a little lively. When they first met, she was clearly a polite little lady. After a while, she began to cause trouble. Her true nature was undoubtedly exposed. Clang, dong, some kind of strange and dull sound came from the bottom of his feet and the surrounding space, causing Yin Nuoxing to raise his eyes slightly and look around. There was no change in the space, but the strange sound of something connecting made him pay attention. Looking at it from the perspective of an observer, he found that he had come to another space that was a little different from the rules and concepts of the space he was in just now. Although he had come to another place, in front of him, well, there were still some small changes. A planar structure that looked like a honeycomb was displayed in front of him. It looked like divine runes and magic formations were woven together. As the platform continued to rise, he could better see the full picture of this strange structure. The higher he went, the clearer he could see. Behind the honeycomb planar structure, there were 2 or 3 rings of different sizes. If this thing was a magic formation, well, he could not sense the energy reaction of the magic formation at all. There was also no concept or law of magic formation in it. However, it did not look like some kind of divine rune. Chaos. Only the energy aura of chaos remained unchanged. In any case, it was impossible for any energy other than chaos energy to appear in this damned place. The orange-gold honeycomb arrays and rings moved in an orderly clockwise and counterclockwise direction in this space. Occasionally, they would turn 360 degrees. A huge ring touched the platform under his feet as it spun. Out of curiosity, he reached out and touched it. However, he did not feel anything. There was only a faint trace of chaos energy that slipped through his hand. He had probably come to a very deep place. There were even more arrays and formations. He did not know when, but the space below him had been taken over by these things. The white clouds of chaos above him were still there. However, there were more arrays in front of him. These arrays definitely did not appear before. Either they only appeared after he came here, or it had just completed this space. It let him wander in the chaos domain for so long because it was still urgently processing this unfinished space. It was trying to stall for time. Nonsense. He was just imagining things. However, it did not matter which situation it was. Something else appeared in front of him. It was not those arrays that were condensed by energy. It was something that actually existed and had a volume. It was a huge floating island. Its craggy bottom first appeared in his eyes. It was like a mountain range with countless mountains turned upside down in front of him. The floating island was not particularly big. It was about the size of 1 or 2/3 of a big city. Therefore, when he saw the bottom of the island, it only took him 2 or 3 minutes to see the surface of the floating island. Clang! When the platform of pillars reached the same level as the surface of the floating island, it stopped. It was like the sound of a ship being anchored. Yin turned around and looked behind him. He did not think much and walked forward. In front of him was a huge floating island. The space in this position had expanded again. The orange-gold array did not dispel the dark color of the land in front of him. So, it was still dark in front of him. Not only that, the buildings in the land were green and dark blue. They looked a little cold. It made him feel like he had walked into the damn hall of hell. He was familiar with that place. Also, the hall was deliberately decorated like that. He did not know why. Originally, stop. Although the scene in front of him made him feel a little nostalgic, this was not the time to do that. These should be the buildings of the king's palace. Yin said to the little angel in his soul, the architectural style is a little like the June throne and the spirit king's palace. Almost all the buildings looked like the style of a palace, or a grand hall. According to the style of the king's palace, it should be shining with golden light. It should be magnificent and full of golden light. However, the cold style in front of him, it was probably because of the dark blue and green energy traces that climbed up these buildings. It was like some ancient vines that grew along the buildings. At the same time, it also changed the appearance of the buildings. He patted his head. The golden light appeared in front of him. His vision suddenly changed. The cold color faded away. The whole city was shining with golden light. It was as if there were golden clouds in the sky. This looked more familiar. It was indeed the style of the king's palace. The place where the king's palace was originally located has now been completely occupied by the energy of chaos. Little angel, Mei Mao flapped her fan and whispered, assimilated, probably occupied. Yin Nuoxing shook his head and said, the energy of chaos swallowed everything in front of it into its body. It turned the original pure energy, even the life energy, into the nutrients of the energy of chaos. Therefore, the situation in front of us, in an easy way, is that the energy of chaos has been contaminated and transformed. However, it still has some of its own characteristics. If it was completely assimilated, there should only be pure dark energy of chaos in this big city. But now, it has not reached that level yet. Walking in this empty and silent big city, where even the color of the scenery was cold and gloomy, the little angel felt strange even though she was hiding in her soul. She could not help but use her wings to cover herself. She even hurriedly rolled herself up with a blanket. Yin Nuoxing could only smile bitterly at this girl's ostrich-like behavior. He continued to walk forward calmly. However, his walking speed was obviously faster than before. He was also shivering. If something suddenly appeared at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. He was here to fight, not to play with his heart. Kacha! The sound of a foot falling on something was suddenly heard. The two of them looked down at the same time. There were suddenly many dark blue and green crystals on the flat ground. The energy of chaos accompanying them was slightly weaker. It was obvious that it was only at the initial stage of contamination. There was also a faint aura of order in the depths of the crystals. It was like a candle in the wind. They could not even struggle. Yin Nuoxing picked up the fragments that he had stepped on and looked at them. After a while, he clenched his fists slightly and crushed them. They were as brittle as sand that had been weathered for thousands of years. He casually scattered the fragments on the ground. Then, He looked up at the front of the street. He turned a corner and saw that the street in front of him was filled with these dual-colored crystals. They crawled all over the street and climbed up the buildings on both sides. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere changed from a horrifying night tour in hell to a strange adventure in the city of crystals. Order repels the aura of chaos. It is probably a change caused by the collapse of one of the structural rules. After a little analysis, Yin Nuoxing continued to walk on the crystallized avenue. Every step he took was accompanied by the sound of crystals being crushed. The kacha-kacha sound was endless. Those who did not know would think that he was tearing down the city just by listening to the sound. As for the end point of these crystals, the place where they spread out, it was the very eerie and cold palace in the center. It was covered in ice and metal luster from head to toe. He could feel that the aura of chaos was the strongest there. If he was not wrong, it should be waiting for him there. When Yin Nuoxing was a distance away from the palace, a cold wind suddenly blew in front of him. The orange-gold array in the sky suddenly dissipated, along with a white cloud of chaos. After that, he watched the sky open bit by bit. It was as if he was standing in a box. He was standing in a sealed space with only an iron wall. At this moment, the lid was suddenly opened. The scene of the sky from above rushed into his eyes. Part of the realm of chaos was opened, and the dark sky outside appeared in his sight. The realm of chaos is still there. Why did the lid suddenly open? What is that outside? His gaze suddenly paused. In the sky above, a black vortex was hanging upside down in the sky. Its spearhead was pointing to the depths of the sky. The void and nothingness were all over the surrounding space. There was a constant flow of pure energy leaking from it and then entering this space. The energy seemed to be gathering from all directions towards the vortex in the sky. The free pure energy was converted into pure chaos energy. The chaos energy that originally existed in the cloud continent gushed out from the space and kept condensing at that point. It's that energy vortex. The little angel replied softly. When I walked into the realm of chaos, I was still some distance away from this vortex. I didn't expect to come here so quickly. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes slightly, and his walking footsteps suddenly became faster. In a few moments, he ran to the front of the main hall. When he kicked open the door of the main hall and was about to charge in, the scene in front of him suddenly changed again. Dim, dark blue, green. Well, the space that belonged to the realm of chaos appeared in front of him again. He was speechless for a moment. Are you playing hide-and-seek or a maze with me here? But after taking 2 steps, he found that he had not returned to the starting point. When he turned back, he could still see the cold, big city, the orange-gold array in the distance, and half of this space. The only thing that changed was that the palace was gone. The building that should have existed in front of him had become something else. It was a crystallized forest made of crystals, spikes, and light green crystals that were thousands of feet tall. It looked like a dangerous forest made of thousands of crystallized swords randomly standing in front of him. It looked not fun. The breath of chaos came from the deepest part. He could vaguely see the thing that existed in the deepest part of the crystallized surface. It was a black shadow that looked like a cocoon made of crystallized crystals. The breath of chaos was so strong that it was a little unbearable. The little angel took a sniff and quickly threw the blanket away. She almost vomited in his spiritual world. You are also a non-order life form. Why do you have such a reaction? The sound of retching made Yin Nuoxing's hair stand on end. The little angel took a deep breath. Her golden maymao dimmed. She hammered the ground in discomfort. She probably wanted to hit him. That thing, although I'm also a non-order life form and belong to chaos, that thing. Ugh, that thing is not the same as me. That thing is even more. Ugh, I can't take it anymore. I have to go and vomit for a while. Ugh. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. After all, they were in his spiritual world. When she vomited, his mind was filled with the image of this girl holding his head and vomiting like a spittoon. Hiss. That cocoon of light was indeed disgusting. The impact was too strong. Just looking at it made him panic. The energy of chaos was too strong. This time was for real. The order, the law, and the energy were completely comparable to the heavenly God of origins. The only thing was that the quantity of this thing was not very large. It was a powerful life form, but it did not have the quantity to reach that level. To put it simply, the volume of a sea was only the volume of a ladle of water. That was what it meant. He took out the Netherworld Ruined sword and cut the crystallized forest in front of him like he was cutting chives. The crystallized swords that filled the sky shattered and were sent flying backward by the explosion of energy. They fell on the city in front of him like he was cutting tofu and cut a deep abyss in the ground. Be careful. I am going to use the law of origin and the power of origin at full strength, Yin Nuashing reminded her. Hearing this, the little angel wiped her mouth and quickly hugged the little purple soul and hid under the blanket. As soon as he stepped into the crystallized forest, Yin Nuashing's body trembled violently. Some kind of extremely strong and mixed evil and distracting thoughts pressed down on his head with a solid weight. His vision suddenly turned black. Part of the scene in front of him turned scarlet, and the other part turned dark gray. It was all a mess. Even when he looked at his own body, it was gradually becoming a mess of lines. Is this part of the aura of a life form of that level? Yin Nuashing closed his eyes and shook his head hard. He took a deep breath. This aura. No wonder the little girl wanted to vomit. He could guarantee that even Hui would want to vomit if he was standing here. It was powerful enough to distort everything in the world. It was powerful enough to pollute everything in the world. Distortion, chaos, confusion, nightmares, evil was something more disgusting than the sins of the world. If the latter was the condensation of all dark thoughts, then this aura of chaos was something that could distort all dark thoughts into something even more evil. It was a chaos object that completely contradicted the origin. The relic of origin in his body, well, it was no longer a relic of origin. It was something that had been restored after all the relics of origin had fused together. It was the world core of the origin world, although it was still a little dazed and had yet to fully recover. The world core that he took out from his body was something that resembled a small galaxy. With him as the center, there were a dozen fist-sized orbs of light that were as bright as the sun orbiting around him. The power of origin constantly emanating from the world core cleansed the heaviness, darkness, distortion, and collapse in his body. The grayness and scarlet in his vision faded as well. His body was finally able to stand straight, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Phew, this won't do. It feels a little worse than I thought. Yin Nuashing muttered inwardly. He lifted the nether void sword and walked forward. His body was like a fountain that emanated the power of order and origin, continuously dispersing the pervasive chaos energy 2 feet away. It was as if he was walking against a hurricane. Everything in the world, dark, distorted, and chaotic, carried an aura deeper than death. Along with the dark airflow, they swept through the space around him. It was so heavy that it could extinguish all the flames of hope in the world. This thing was not at the same level as that demonic shadow or the shadow he had seen just now. Even if it was just brewing, it was still so. Thump! The sound of a heartbeat came from the chaotic cocoon. It sounded like a yellow bell ringing, echoing in the big city. The fragile crystals cracked little by little, shattering into sharp raindrops and falling down from the sky. The drumming had only just begun. It seemed to have sensed his approach and was stopping him from moving forward. It had already reached such a level that it needed to do its best to stop him from moving forward while it was still a cocoon. Is it a critical moment? Yin Nuashing held the origin barrier in one hand and the nether void sword in the other. He moved forward with difficulty, covered in stars. At this moment, if he had the slightest thought of relaxing, he would be thrown into nothingness by the chaos energy in the next second. What a coincidence. Me too. Let's see whose moment is more critical. In the conceptual layer of the rules, the energy that pierced through the void, nothingness, and tore all the concepts apart swept through the dark space like a violent tsunami. A huge crack appeared in the realm of order. although it only took a short moment for Jing Yuanji to repair it. The cracks seemed to have not only torn the realm of order, but also seemed to have torn apart the conceptual layer of the rules. In just a moment, she could see the colors of the realm of reality. Vaguely, she felt that the atmosphere of the realm of reality had become a little bad. She did not know if something had happened to the realm of reality itself, or if the battle here had finally affected the realm of reality. Streaks of lightning-like gray light beams that were as large as galaxies crisscrossed in the darkness and shadows. The warriors of the realm of order carried an astonishing momentum and went against the waves, pushing themselves to their limits to deal with the crazy chaos energy. Continuous explosions surged in the depths of the conceptual layer of the rules, mixed with the broken aura of order, burst out. More than half of the conceptual layer of the rules were already in a state of complete chaos. She also did not know that this realm of reality, the entire realm of reality, had already shown signs of madness. Since 10 minutes ago, the aura of chaos had multiplied by several times, as if it was using all its power to drown them here. Deep in the conceptual layer, we have captured the appearance of crazy manifestations again, and there are even more abnormal phenomena. The next wave of chaos will come in about 5 minutes. Hurry up and support the defensive energy towers. Without this barrier, we won't be able to hold on. Stars. It's the stars. That's the condensation of highly concentrated energy, the condensed chaos energy. Large patches of energy fireworks were torn into pieces by the even more violent energy. Countless crisscrossing gray and gold energy patterns suddenly formed in the air and then were torn apart in an instant. All kinds of fragmented scenes mixed together, and countless strange and terrifying scenes formed and then disappeared, just like a canvas splashed with a bucket of mottled paint, and then turned into an abstract painting with a few strokes of the brush, and then transformed into an ink landscape painting in an instant. One by one, the chaos manifestations that floated out of nothingness were all in a state of madness the moment they appeared, and even before they condensed in a solid form. They were already modified into other bizarre structures by an even more insane will. She saw with her own eyes that a manifestation that should have been humanoid was forcibly twisted into a warped, flesh-like object when it was still a shadow. Countless chaos runes branded that colossal body the size of a planet, its body full of protruding energy veins and flesh-like structures. Now Jing Yuanji looked up. Gray radiance appeared in the depths of the conceptual layer of rules. Violent suns that used chaos energy as their crystal cores were condensed and slowly crashed towards the realm of order the moment they appeared. They were massive in size and capacity, and it would take some time for them to walk in the overloaded conceptual layer of rules. She could deal with them a little emergency treatment. As for how many could be saved, it was hard to say. Energy towers that are more than 50% intact will enter self-destruct mode. Don't rush to attack, and don't interrupt attacks of other levels. Extract all the rules and energy of those energy towers that are about to be destroyed. Jing Yuanji took a deep breath, and the surging spatial energy maintained the stability of the place as much as possible. Something big was about to happen. Bury all of them in the path of the stars. This thing would blow up the conceptual layer of rules if it was not handled well, but there was no other way now. This is the last batch of energy towers. Xing LV placed more than 1,000 brand new energy towers in the realm of order, and was so tired that he stuck his tongue out. All of them are made with our special energy as the core. The last batch. Hui held the Guardian's great sword as he charged back from the Chaos Army, landing in the realm of order and panting heavily. His body that was made of energy was a little dim, and some parts of him were flickering. The pressure is rising too fast. Since 20 minutes ago, it has been raising the difficulty as if its life is on the line. Raising. I can't take it anymore. Over there, Lord Feng. Jing Yuanji suddenly whispered softly, startling everyone. Lord Feng might be close to the core. So the pressure on our side has skyrocketed? That bastard is already impatient. Because it can't take Lord Feng's approach, it plans to attack us first. Hui cursed as he split the Guardian shield into two, smashing one half on the energy barrier and the other half into the energy towers that were being converted into chaotic energy. Fight it out with them. How long is it before the 2 hours? Less than 10 minutes. So the next wave of chaos will be the end. Hui gritted his teeth, but he did not want them to be the end. Mei Mao, Jing Yuanji, flashed and took out a small sword that was only the size of an index finger. She hesitated for a moment, and then kept it. It's not time yet. It's not the time that Lord Feng said. They needed to use their own way, and use all their strength to delay the arrival of the destruction to 10 minutes later. Chapter 1649. Everyone, attack with full energy. Attack in sequence. Don't let the area covered by energy disappear for even a second. The defensive energy towers have stabilized, but Lord Hui, the energy is not enough this time. Don't worry about the defensive array. Attack with all you've got. Leave the defense to me. Yes, Lord. There was a scene in the distance. The continuous distorted light curtain was like a picture of broken ripples splashed by waves on the beach and reefs. The shattered power of the rules, the shattered energy of the order, and the wasted energy and energy aftershocks mixed together to form such a bizarre scene. That place had become another forbidden place that Hui and the others did not want to touch, and the chaos spawn would avoid. It was the wreckage left behind by the countless explosions of energy on the battlefield. There was still a huge amount of energy inside that had not subsided, and it was still expanding. Although they knew that it was dangerous, no one had the time to deal with it. Who would dare to be distracted by other things under such circumstances? That place had become another forbidden place that Hui and the others did not want to touch, and the chaos spawn would avoid. It was the wreckage left behind after countless explosions of energy on the battlefield. There was still a huge amount of energy that had not subsided, and it was still expanding. Although they knew that it was dangerous, no one had the time to deal with it. Not long after the order was given, the overwhelming energy blast crossed the conceptual layer of the rules and bombarded the army of chaos spawns. Half of the chaos barrier formed by the chaos spawns was penetrated in the blink of an eye. Most of the order energy blasted into the army of chaos spawns, blasting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of chaos spawns into nothingness, and were thrown into the void to be destroyed. But unfortunately, the few irascible giants and the chaos runes that were madly gathering energy only caused ripples of black and gray energy to appear. Normal order energy attacks could not penetrate that level of chaos energy condensation. And even if Yin Noashing charged over, she would not be able to cause any more damage than Ji Shu Yin's sword. TSK, that barrier of rules and chaos order is too much of a hindrance. Everyone, get out of the way. Let those irascible giants follow the normal path. Don't block their path, and keep the side of the battlefield clean. Hui was not surprised to see that his attempted attack did not cause any effective damage to the combination of chaos characters and chaos energy. He continued to calmly give out orders. Then, he adjusted his own energy and state, desperately increasing the resistance of his order realm. He kept increasing it until it reached a point where its defense was shocking. If we can't kill those things, we'll bury everything else here. At most, we'll perish together. Xing Lu roared. Karmic fire that burned through the void fell from the sky, like a rain of fire, smashing the endless sea of fire into the conceptual layer of the rules. The aura of the chaos energy was burned away a little, and the chaos spawn's movements became sluggish. A large number of destructive attacks followed from behind, crushing it to death at the intersection of the flames and the void. Even so, the irascible giants and the chaos runes were not affected at all. They were crossing the distance of the conceptual layer of the rules, traveling the stars and the moon to find them. It was really a movement of a galaxy rushing towards them. First, there were only a few giants. Then, from the void, from the conceptual layer of the rules, more stars floated up. However, those were just dense chaos energy and were not as violent as the former. At most, they were disposable bombs. Although on the surface, the latter looked more threatening, and they floated all over the conceptual layer of the rules. When they looked up, they could see a mass of black energy covered in a layer of gray protective film, like a comet streaking across the space. When that group of stars with the aura of destruction that oppressed the realm of order approached a certain distance, Jing Yuanji suddenly stopped her movements. Her beautiful eyes flickered, and her line of sight moved closer, nervously watching those stars pressing over. When they suddenly approached a certain point, an extremely dazzling light suddenly appeared in their path, and the energy that had been rampaging for a long time suddenly came into contact with it. Boom! The light was as dazzling as the explosion of a supernova. More than half of the chaos spawns that approached those stars were destroyed by the energy, while the rest were pushed into the exposed void by the impact of the energy that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Eat fire, you bastard! I don't believe you'll be able to withstand the lightning all the way. Violent energy ripples abruptly appeared from the energy storm that could tear through the conceptual layer of the rules. Those few giants that were lined up in a row crashed into the energy storm with a suppressive volume. The sound of rolling energy ripples reverberated in the area, constantly highlighting their conspicuous presence. Hui was speechless. The energy tower they had built was not constructed from materials found in ordinary worlds. Instead, it was an existence materialized and solidified in the world using the power of order, and pure energy that distorted worlds. In other words, even if it appeared to be a solid object forged from stone, its essence was a large cluster of stable, extremely stable, and dense energy. The energy storm back then was caused by the energy tower that was on the verge of collapse due to the excessive output of energy, causing its structure to become unstable. Even the army of chaos spawns would not have been able to withstand it if the energy that was about to disperse was blown apart in a single breath. That should have been the case. In fact, such a scene should have appeared in his simulation. But now, those giants were risking their lives to withstand a lightning bolts. Only some of them were not aware that they were too close and were swept into the destructive energy and annihilated. But now, again and again, the flashes of ultimate energy formed an impenetrable net of energy. Those suns were really coming from the front, accurately triggering each mine as the destructive energy kept bursting out. They had no intention of taking a detour from start. Even when they saw the destructive energy that kept flashing before them, they did not care to approach. They were using their faces to scout the path, fearlessly charging towards the spot where they had buried the mines. The sight alone was enough to make Huey's scalp tingle. If he were to be the one to step into the mine, Hui felt that he would have been reduced to a ragged mosaic. Jing Yuanji ignored the heroic and fearless scene. As she commanded the others to continue the battle, she inadvertently looked up at the scene where the dazzling light of creation was bursting out, and then watched as they charged out unscathed, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Just think about it, a thunderbolt in every path, and every step they took would cause a burst of energy that could turn the void into nothingness and blow up more than half of the world group. And only the chaos spawns could withstand such a level of energy impact. But because of that, their speed has slowed down a lot. If they go too fast, the chaos spawn won't be able to completely dodge our attacks. They'll have to stick close to those big guys to block our energy attacks, but if they get too close, they'll be sucked in by the destructive storm. Hui muttered to himself, "How much longer? 5 minutes. But at the latest, they will be here in less than 2 minutes. We will enter the attack range of those giants with the most energy." Jing Yuanji said softly. At this time, the realm of order was compressed into a flat area, and behind them was the edge. They would be out of the realm of order if they retreated. Without this layer of the realm of order, they could only retreat back to the real world. The gray destructive energy of chaos fell on the realm of order, causing the entire realm to tremble. After a series of lightning strikes, the breathing time that they gained by surprise was used up. After a short period of suppression with firepower, the chaos spawns quickly recovered from the chaos. The giants suddenly put up an energy shield and pushed the realm of chaos towards them. And when Hui and the others were stunned for a moment, they began to counterattack. And so, the realm of order and the sacred barrier shook again. What the hell is wrong with them? They didn't use the energy shield when they had it, and now they're only holding it up after half of the lightning strikes. Are they mocking us? Hui looked at the huge chaos shield and the realm of chaos, and his face turned green. A chaos spawn that could hold up the realm of chaos. Forgive him for not having seen such a thing. The realm of chaos that existed in the conceptual level of the rules was already there. Because no one could control it immediately, it was easy for them to dig a hole and attack here. But now, that sun was holding up the realm of chaos. Haha, they were using their heads to fight. Right from the start, the counterattack was a torrential storm of chaos attacks. Spatial distortions of various sizes appeared in the realm of order and the holy barrier. A huge crack opened up in the space, and one could even see the appearance of the main realm. It was just a flash. Hui was stunned for a moment. That was the crack that suddenly appeared in front of them revealed another scene. Gray, dark blue, and black light blended together and exploded from the center of a distorted crystal forest. It went straight to the sky, and an indescribably huge amount of chaos energy rose up like seawater against the sky. It turned into circles of chaos energy and spread in all directions. However, the spread was not too strong at the moment. The small creation's barrier could still withstand this level of chaos attack. That was probably the scene in the real world. However, this place that was covered by the crystal forest did not seem to exist. He had no impression of it, and neither did Jihan Xiao and the rest. However, just looking at the scene of chaos energy slowly spreading out was enough to make them feel uneasy. That scene was just a flash in the pan. The crack disappeared after a short while. It was violent enough to make them feel pressured. They looked at each other and looked at the army of chaos spawns that was still approaching in front of them. Their expressions were solemn. "Foam," Hui murmured in his heart. He took a deep breath and stopped himself from thinking about the scene that he had just seen. He had to leave the realm of order to him, and he could only leave it to him. Meanwhile, they had to settle everything in the concept layer of the rules. They had already agreed that it would be fine as long as they believed in him. He was just a little worried. Boom! The realm of order energy that was like endless ripples on water swept across the entire concept layer of the rules. Hui raised his head abruptly. The huge energy flames and distorted belts were already in front of him. Some kind of energy that made him feel disgusted was getting close to him. After a short delay, that thing suddenly broke through the blockade of the energy flames. It was as if it had reached a critical point. The storm-like chaos energy started to attack the sacred barrier. Countless chaos spawns rushed forward and engaged in close combat with the warriors of order. They started their third and possibly final attack at the boundary of the realm of order. Hui roared and ignited all the energy in his body. The endless energy released by the seven god halos turned him into a small golden sun. All the realm of order energy was released. He shouted, "Everyone, retreat into the realm of order. Those who still have the strength to stabilize the barrier of the defense energy tower, Jihan Xiao, release all of your realm of order energy. We need the realm of order energy from the cloud continent. The chaos impact is coming." The moment they reached the critical point, the battle lasted for less than 10 seconds. The warriors of order all started to retreat and turned into a defensive state. Countless chaos spawns rushed out from behind the big stars like ants leaving their nest. Although they had killed most of them along the way, there were still quite a number of chaos spawns that appeared on the battlefield. Moreover, those few big stars were still intact. Behind them were the fully charged chaos characters. At this moment, they were like a gray pupil that was staring at the golden light that was independent of the realm of order. The energy that they had accumulated along the way exploded at such a close distance. They were trying to beat them to death. In an instant, a dark energy radiance flashed. A light cluster, as large as a galaxy, instantly erupted. The distance was too close. It was so large that it was as if a dark energy cluster had burst out from the chaos runes. In an instant, the entire domain of order and the holy barrier was swallowed up by it. Hui released all the energy with all his might. Jing Yuanji commanded everyone to strengthen the barrier of the defense energy tower. The world that was engulfed by the gray light ball seemed to have faded into meaningless gray and nothingness. It was the same outcome as the previous two chaos impacts. Even though they had gathered all the realm of order energy for defense this time, the sacred barrier and the realm of order were still half destroyed in an instant. Even the guardian barrier, which was at the bottom, had cracks on it. Countless energies were annihilated in an instant. The first few rows of energy towers that stood at the front started to collapse due to the influence of the chaos energy. To them, the entire world was in an endless state of shaking and shaking. Jing Yuanji stared at the guardian barrier as more and more cracks appeared due to the collapse of the outer barrier. She slowly closed Mei Mao. She made a decision in her heart. Just as she was about to grit her teeth and carry it out, the small sword in her hand suddenly glowed. The red and black light carried the infinite power of destruction. It was a little ominous, but in this completely gray world, it made her feel incomparably warm. The storm of chaos. Allow him to describe the scene in front of him. Apart from that, he could not see anything else. Every gust of black wind from the dense dark hurricane was a sharp wind blade that could cut through space, time, and the void like tofu. That's right, it was still a gust of wind that was stirred up by chaos energy, allowing this gust of wind to sweep across the entire cloud continent without any hindrance. In less than a minute, he could only see the continent being cut into billions of pieces, and anything that was attached to it would be reduced to dust, leaving nothing behind. The power of order and the origin energy were ultimately limited. No, the origin energy and the origin law that he could use was ultimately limited. His body was too weak, and his soul was slightly weak. He could not bear this degree of weight. So when he walked to this distance with the origin law and the origin energy, of course, his body began to crumble bit by bit. The greater the degree of erosion of the chaos energy, the greater the degree of self-resistance of the origin energy. They did not care whether his body could bear it or not. This was just a self-protection ability that he had. He just happened to need this self-protection ability at this moment. He used their energy to walk to the center of the storm. Crack! The nether void sword slammed into the ground in front of him with the weight of billions of worlds. The tremendous force split the ground in front of him into a crack that was only 50 to 60 feet long. The impact was so deep that the ground shook like an earthquake. He could see that the house in the distance suddenly jumped up like a quilt placed on a table. Then it sat back down and shattered itself. The crystallized forest also fell apart. Countless shards turned into a rain of sharp blades that fell on the ground, riddling the earth with thousands of holes. The dense shards fell into the origin domain propped up by the small star system, and the sound of metal clanging rang out. Phew! Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh of relief after withdrawing his nether void sword. His eyes, which were burning with red and black flames, stared at the chaotic cocoon that was less than 100 meters away from him, but still refused to let him approach it. Amidst the dark wind, he raised his right hand. The golden cracks were densely packed. It was like a porcelain that did not break, but was covered in cracks. Golden light of energy burst out from the cracks. The excessive activation of the origin energy was slowly disintegrating his body, just as he had said earlier. He clenched his right hand hard. The red and black light flashed. The golden cracks that covered his palm quietly dimmed, and a slender palm that was as white as jade was restored. There was no trace of destruction. However, after a moment, small golden cracks began to appear on his palm. It was as if a golden flame was slowly burning his body from within. He raised his hand and swung the nether void sword again. A brilliant sword light bloomed, and the rain of crystal blades ended prematurely. He held the nether void sword in his hand and pushed the black wind in front of him away with his left hand. He continued to walk towards the cocoon. He had cleared away the obstacles in his way. However, the disappearance of the obstacles made the chaos wind blow even more fiercely. Furthermore, the wind was directed at him. Girl, prepare yourself. I'm going to rush over in one go. Yin Nuashing suddenly stopped in place, staring at the big cocoon with eyes that flickered with madness and death. His heart was uneasy. He was already uneasy when he saw it, and now that he had slowly walked so far away, he finally reached this distance. Theoretically speaking, it should be possible. Theoretically, he would either be devoured by the chaos energy of the cocoon, or he would pierce the cocoon and be thrown into the void. Either way, he only had one chance. In the end, he could not see what would happen. This was the only thing he could do. Void. Just as Yinoashing began to condense the origin energy on the nether void sword, he sensed that the chaos storm around him suddenly weakened. It stopped little by little. The dim colors began to recede. The violent chaos energy in this space calmed down in an instant. The entire world suddenly became quiet. It became dead silent. Then there was only him and the big cocoon that shone with obsidian light. Silently, something was changing in the dark. However, he seemed to have no way to stop it. The black fog wrapped around his body and silently brought him to a few meters in front of the chaos cocoon. It was the center of the crystal forest. All the sharp crystals were formed from it. They appeared from the ground and space out of thin air. All the spikes were pointed at it. The breath that made the girl exhale had disappeared. However, it did not mean that everything was over. Some things did not seem to have happened in time. You were one step too late. A low chuckle rang in his ears. Yin Nuashing raised his head slightly and looked to the side. At the bottom of the crystal pillar was a figure that looked like a black fog. It was its shadow. It just leaned there with its arms crossed. Its face was so dark that it could not be distinguished at all. Unexpectedly, he felt a hint of playfulness in it. Crack, crack. The big cocoon began to crack in front of him. The layers of light cocoon began to break apart from the outermost layer. The dark light inside became more and more intense. It was so bright that it was like a dark sun piercing through the nebula. The dark light broke free from the cage of the crack. The surging chaos energy had taken shape and was gradually condensing into something. Yinawashing looked at this scene calmly. He raised the nether void sword several times, but he put it down weakly. His face was gloomy. Countless years after the origin passed away, the flag that belongs to us, to chaos, will once again fly in the Grand Yuan realm. After countless eras, we have finally returned. The endless chaos will once again descend upon this world. Open your eyes and witness this scene with your own eyes. This is something that even the origin and the others could not do. The transparent light column that contained endless madness and darkness burst out from the big cocoon with a sharp buzzing sound of energy. It penetrated the illusory sky and went straight into the void. It cast a dark light on the entire cloud continent. A huge orange-gold ring and array appeared from the void and took shape in the world. A dark energy that overrode all the rules and order of the world appeared out of thin air in any corner of the void. Even the small barrier of creation was no exception. Yin Nuashing slowly closed his eyes. The surging origin energy in his body slowly dimmed. Was it too late? Chapter 1650. Calculating. What could he calculate? Unable to think of a way out, he trapped himself in a cage and struggled incessantly to calculate a way out that might not exist. He crashed into the wall, chiseled the wall, and left mottled bloodstains on the wall until the entire wall was stained with frightening mottled blood. Then what about the path? Unable to find it, trapped to death here. That was probably it. Perhaps this was the end, and he just wanted to struggle. Everyone had a chance to struggle, didn't they? He also needed to struggle a little. Then what about the path? Who knows where the path is? He was never a person who gave up easily. Since the beginning of his memories, he had been living in a state of struggle. Struggling under the general trend of the void, bobbing up and down, doing everything he could to survive in the void of order. When he came to his senses, he had already become like this. Everything seemed to be set in stone. Therefore, even if he knew that this was the worst situation from the start, he did not give up easily. How could he not struggle hard? Even if there were countless evidence that the path in this world would only lead to the worst outcome, there would still be a chance for a salted fish to turn things around. So, what he should do next was self-evident. Hurry up and struggle as hard as he could. What if he could really turn things around? If he couldn't, he would just treat it as his last exercise before death, like sprinkling salt more evenly or something. Even so, he could not think of how to struggle at the moment. Billions of soldiers were approaching the city. That was how he felt at this very moment. It was as if he saw the final scene of the war at the end of the Dark Age. That was an established fact. Since he appeared there, then presumably, not necessarily. Perhaps he used some method to get through this crisis. Perhaps this time he was gone, and then he was in a hurry to reincarnate, catching up at the end of the Dark Age or something. What a joke. The cloud continent was completely silent. Only the gray energy beam pierced through the sky. Chaotic energy surged in all directions like endless ripples in the ocean, rolling up a visible, majestic, and vast energy tide in the sky. It was as if a dark ocean had appeared in the sky. The light in this world had completely dimmed, suppressing the void and nothingness. The chaos energy began to do whatever it wanted, disregarding all obstacles and emerging from every corner of the cloud continent. The small creation's barrier was still working hard. It was still using its own power of rules and power of order to suppress the chaos energy that had appeared inexplicably in the domain. It could barely suppress the speed of the chaos energy emerging in the domain, but it could only control the speed. It was completely impossible to completely isolate the chaos energy from appearing. This level of suppression was too difficult for it to bear. If it had to bear the pressure of this level that it should not have, it might still be able to do it. If it had brought one of the creation's pillars from the divine realm here, it might still be able to do it. It could also stabilize the order in the creation's domain. But it was just a thought. Yin Nuashing let his cognition, thoughts, soul, and spirit return to reality. He took a deep breath and slowly opened his eyes. The endless dark energy blew in front of his eyes, fluttering his robe and long hair. Even his body that was completely transformed into pure energy rippled out a few lines of energy ripples. Its shadow had already disappeared. It was no longer needed. At this moment, it was enveloped in the light cocoon that was emitting endless chaos energy. It sounded like glass shattering continuously. The silhouette in the light cocoon slowly stood up. Its body still did not have any substantial details. It was just a thing that had the shape of a human. It was exactly the same as if someone had thrown a person into a pool of ink and then fished it out. It was exactly the same, except that its appearance was more demonic. Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at the vast energy light column above him. It was releasing endless chaos energy into the void. He did not know what would happen when the energy poured into the void, but there was no doubt that the void of order would be unimaginably affected. That was without a doubt. Furthermore, according to the information he obtained from the two conversations he had with the chaos energy, it was most likely going to collapse the void of order and then reconstruct a void that was not controlled by order, or it would directly let the chaos energy destroy the void of order. Either way, it would not end well. Things have not reached the worst point yet. His eyes that were looking at the sky trembled slightly and could not help but widen a little. He saw the void and the boundary of the black nest turning from formless into a physical form. It seemed to have trapped the place and turned it into a cage. There was a layer of transparent and invisible barrier at the boundary. It only took a glance for him to know that it was an energy barrier cast by the origin energy. It was the last defense that they left in this world. Perhaps they already knew about this. They placed the origin relic here and even covered the black nest with a layer of protection. He believed that there must be an emergency solution later. For example, when they confirmed that the chaos energy had completely taken over the black nest, they could cut this space and the void together and throw it into the void to be annihilated. The meaning of the existence of seals was to break the seal. With their foresight, they must have known about it. So he was also completely sure that they had other backup plans to deal with this space. Burial. Find someone comparable to the heavenly god of origins to be buried with them. That sounds like the funeral of the highest standard in my infinite life. Yin Nuashing covered her face and laughed a few times. She shook her head. Since we know that the void of order will not be affected, and that this game is not over yet, there is no way we would choose to surrender now. If worst comes to worst, we will all die together. I dare to die. Come, let's die together. The chaos cocoon shattered with a crisp sound of energy. Its figure appeared from within and slowly stood up. It turned around and looked at him. It looked exactly the same as the shadow just now. However, the pressure that this real existence before him gave him was not something that the half-baked shadow could compare to. If they were to really fight, it would not be as easy as it was just now. I didn't expect that it was still within their calculations. It glanced at him and then turned away. Then, like him, it looked up at the distance above. Its low murmur was accompanied by the echoes of the chaos energy. The dusk of the cloud continent rippled with its every move. However, just like all of you, I don't have much of a choice. Don't you think so, heir of the origin? Yin Nuashing raised her eyebrows and looked at it. It seemed to have sensed something, as if something was happening. That was why it sighed, but he had not sensed it yet. Well, he had sensed it. Boom! A sudden explosion of energy annihilation suddenly sounded from behind. Yin Nuashing was slightly stunned. She tilted her head and looked behind her. A cluster of colorful energy flames suddenly rose from the ground. The destructive energy was like a raging beast, raging within the explosion range. Gradually, it swept further away. At the end of the horizon, the sky suddenly appeared. Another cluster of violent energy exploded without warning. Before the explosion of the destructive power, Yin Nuashing could not sense anything in that direction that could release such destructive energy. The energy of the origin. The impact was delayed for less than 2 seconds before it passed through the loss. It turned into a gust of wind that blew through his body. He immediately understood that this should be what it sensed. The chaos energy was raging. The backup plan in the cloud continent was activated. There was no need to wait for the chaos energy to take over everything. It only needed to sense that the chaos energy had expanded to a certain extent to begin the cleansing. First, it would destroy everything on the surface. First, it would spread the chaos energy, then everything that was contaminated by the chaos energy. Finally, it would sink the chaos energy itself into the void along with this space. But that did not have much to do with him. Yin Nuashing turned around and slowly raised a nether void sword to point at it. In the space beside him, circles of spinning magic circles emerged from the void. The surging energy attracted its attention. Don't you understand what is happening right now? Inheritor of the origin. It looked at Yin Nuashing calmly. This world cannot be saved. The preparations they left behind will sink this world into the void along with it. It will be ignited by the pure laws of the origin and the energy of the origin. Not even ashes will be left. You and I cannot avoid it. This is a cage. I can't break this shackle alone. But if it's you, yes, if it's both of us. It spread its hands and laughed with a calm voice. How about it, inheritor of the origin? This is your second chance. Do you choose to join the chaos or fall here as order? What do you think? Haven't you already seen through me? Even if this ending leads to death, right? It suddenly laughed for real this time. Before this, it was just a fake smile. This time, it seemed that it really found something interesting and laughed from the bottom of its heart. I didn't expect you to have such a deep attachment to order. Interesting. You really are an interesting fellow. No wonder it would nag a life form of order so much. So that's why I'm getting more and more interested in you. Yin Nuashing raised an eyebrow. Was it talking about the demonic shadow in the graveyard of gods and demons? It seemed that there was some kind of connection between the clone and the main body that could make the main body. So, they're actually together now? Then is this the main body of the demonic shadow in front of me? Or forget it. Forget it. It's not important. What's important is that it's very powerful. It's powerful enough for me to burn this life of mine to deal with it. It's a pity that I'm not in the realm of the gods. Otherwise, I would be able to explore the extent of my state. My petition, huh? How funny. This is the first time I've really stretched my hand here. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. The origin energy and the origin law suddenly went berserk in its body. The suppression that was still there suddenly disappeared. The true power of the origin energy was fully released. A dazzling hurricane formed by the endless origin energy suddenly blew on its body. It watched as its body was engulfed by the colorful hurricane. It could not help but laugh again. It's very similar to their aura. This is the aura of the origin energy that has removed all restraints. It reminds me of the time when they existed. I've changed my mind. Since you want to perform a dance in the venue of the end of the world, as half of the host, I have to treat you well. It laughed softly and muttered to itself. Its hands slowly clenched into fists, and chaotic energy surged in its body. At this time, it had enough time to interrupt Yin Nuashing's transformation. However, it was not to that extent that it did not know how to be funny to that extent. The best dance, naturally, could only be performed with the most perfect preparation. Come, show me your most perfect side, inheritor of origin. The thunderous roar of the hurricane's explosion dispersed the dark clouds that shrouded the area once again, responding to its laughter with brilliant sunlight. Yin Nuashing's figure appeared along with the gale created by the origin energy. The mark of origin on his body spread out like living vines, carving out complex patterns in an area of 1 to 2 meters around his body. As space and air flowed, streaks of light flowed out. The mark of destruction on his forehead changed its appearance, expanding its territory to cover the entire area of his forehead. The origin energy and the principle of origin overflowed from his body, allowing it to feel their presence once again. But right after that, it was stunned for a moment. Its gaze was fixed on his eyes. The whites of its eyes were faintly mottled, and the pair of pitch-black eyeballs had turned into a flowing silver-black color. How surprising. The surprise you have given me has once again exceeded my imagination. The who at the beginning of the primordial realm, yes, I can also understand this saying. I also have this feeling, yes. Therefore, there are no details on its face. It was impossible to tell what state it was in. Yin Nuashing had only transformed. When he came out, he heard Yin Nuashing hugging him like a madman and laughing crazily. However, there was only an awe on its face. It looked really awkward. If you don't attack, Yin Nuashing raised the Netherworld Ruin Sword. Then I'll strike first. I'll let you have a taste of the true origin of chaos. In the conceptual layer of the rules, in a realm of order that was submerged by the torrent of gray energy, Jing Yuanji suddenly realized that the small sword that Lord Feng gave her before they set off suddenly emitted an extremely strong light. A familiar energy that was more familiar than the feeling she was familiar with suddenly flowed out from it. It gave her a feeling of danger that was comparable to the collapse of the primordial realm, which made her shudder with fear. When there's movement, remember to throw it at the enemy with all your strength. Don't hurt yourself. Lord Feng's warning suddenly rang in her mind. Thinking about his attack method, Jing Yuanji suddenly understood something. Her pretty face turned pale with fright. She hurriedly stopped pouring energy into the energy barrier and used the greatest strength she could muster in her life to throw the small sword in front of her. A golden light flashed and disappeared from her line of sight. Only after throwing the small sword did she suddenly remember a terrible thing. The chaotic energy in front of her was coming toward her face. That small sword wouldn't be pushed back into the realm of order by that energy, right? However, when she thought of this problem, she couldn't change anything. She watched as the golden light flashed and silently penetrated the gray airflow. Suddenly, a mottled light that fused all the colors in the world shone. A loud shout quietly spread through the conceptual layer of the rules. Origin, chaos. The completely liberated origin energy and the annihilation energy that was not suppressed by origin energy collided at the same time. It was as if two primordial realms were colliding with each other with the momentum of mutual destruction. Everything in the world was converted into energy and fused at the junction point. The two energies exploded at the same time in the concept layer of the rules. The silver-black and colorful energies fused into a wildly expanding energy ball, turning the two energies of order into a tsunami that washed towards the end of the world. The destructive impact that happened at the same time in front of her eyes and in the conceptual layer of the rules made her laughter come to an abrupt end. She felt a little surprised. She didn't expect that Feng Luo even had a trick up his sleeve in the conceptual layer of the rules. The impact of the mixed energies of order carried a tide of energy that dimmed the stars as it came at her face. She waved her hand and held up a chaos barrier. The mixed impact that came at her face instantly collided with the barrier hundreds of thousands of times. The impact of the two energies, the second impact, the third impact caused her chaos barrier to ripple violently. Her body was even pushed tens of thousands of meters away under the impact of the tide. The tide lasted for less than 10 seconds before it dissipated. However, the entire world had changed. The sky in her sight had become fragmented, as if the broken celestial bodies were savagely piled into a massive celestial tomb before her. Well, there was nothing left of the land. It was all bare and flat. Mountains, rivers, lakes, and rivers were all flattened by that energy. The chaos energy that permeated the entire world had also dissipated into nothingness. That was quite normal. She did not feel surprised at all. Those energies were a phenomenon that was similar to her breathing. It was not the result of her deliberate control. However, even the conceptual layer of the rules was almost completely destroyed. That was something she did not expect. As expected of the heir of origins, she could actually unleash the power of origins so incisively and vividly. She could not help but exclaim in admiration. Then, she suddenly turned around, her palm turning into a giant claw with 5 fingers as the chaos energy surged. She swiped the claw at the space behind her. In the air, a multicolored sword light that was hundreds of meters wide abruptly appeared and clashed with her claw. 3. Two energies of order unleashed a power that could kill her opponent in a frenzy, condensing into a giant sphere of distorted energy in the air. Nether Void, Firmament Slash. Yin Nuoxing's figure abruptly appeared from behind the sphere. The energies of origins and annihilation gathered wildly on the Nether Void sword. She leaped into the air and slashed viciously, splitting the chaos energy sphere and the space around it into two. The energy sword light that could devour the void drowned her vision and devoured her energy reaction. 2 moves to kill her, then she would chop her head off and let Hui use it as a urinal. The surge of energy had no intention of stopping from the very beginning. She would not stop until her body completely disintegrated and turned into a speck of dust in the void. Whoosh! The dark energy tore apart the massive sword light that blotted out the sky. A giant claw with piercing power surrounded by chaos energy abruptly appeared from behind the sword light and clawed at Yin Nuoxing. The chaos energy in her palm had already burst out in an instant, exploding violently on the spot. Shadow? The light on its body flickered for a moment. It wasn't strange that its attack had missed. It was just that it saw that Seiji had an expression that said that he wouldn't stop attacking unless he died. Yep, it thought that Seiji would fight it head-on until the end, but didn't expect him to turn around and run. She abruptly turned around. In the void, her silhouettes appeared out of thin air. They were all clones formed from origins and annihilation energy, each of them wielding a great sword of different energies, but identical in appearance. Dark Star Annihilation, Galactic Rain, myriad forms assemble. Dozens of clones abruptly raised their heads to look at her with a violent roar that resounded in the void. Their bodies flickered with the light of the stars and appeared in all directions around her. Then, they raised the great swords in their hands together and became one with their waists and horses, frenzied energy covered the force within a radius of 10,000 miles. Streaks of gigantic sword chi crisscrossed the entire world and the void. Along with the endless starlight that fell from the sky, they wantonly danced in this land. When they fell, and when they fell, they suddenly exploded with destructive energy. The scene was as if 10 billion fireworks had exploded at the same time. It was as if all the prosperity in the world had fallen at the same time, accompanied by the sound of origin destruction that resounded in the cloud continent. It was extremely shocking. She stood at the center of the dazzling and prosperous world. Thousands of colors, thousands of sparks, and scenes of falling stars surrounded her in all directions. It was as if she had seen the scene of that day again. The chaos energy that surged in her body became even more intense. "Come on, inheritor, come and kill me." Suddenly, it laughed out loud and found a direction. Its giant claws, glinting with dark colors, tore the endless visions and energy torrents before it into pieces and broke out of the encirclement. It raised its hands that had turned into claws at a shadow that was still dancing wildly with the galaxy. With a wave of its hand, the bright sky instantly darkened as a demonic claw that seemed to cover the sky descended from the sky and slammed down at the shadow. The shadow suddenly stopped its spinning dance and sheathed its great sword at its waist. After a moment, it used all its strength to suddenly sweep out the sword. All the chaotic energy in this domain suddenly distorted their paths. Half of it rushed toward the giant claw in the sky, while the other half rushed toward the chaos demonic shadow in front of her. Boom! It was another head-on collision. Yin Nuoxing looked at the chaos demonic shadow in front of her and let out a low roar. She forcefully swung her sword forward and knocked herself back. Silver-black energy crazily surged around her body and turned into a silver-black halo that descended behind her. At this moment, even the color of the origin mark surged with a silver-black light. Word of sin, wild howl. The silver-black energy halo suddenly rushed out with a destructive energy that could wipe out everything. The shadow that was about to charge forward suddenly froze. It was completely frozen, just like the last time. It was shocked. After a moment, it couldn't help but laugh wildly. So that's how it is. Using this power together with the power of origin can indeed suppress the chaos, even if it's just for a moment. Yin Nuoxing was wearing the colorful origin azure wings. The destructive energy on her body crazily surged. She turned into a sharp arrow and shot out from where she was standing. In just an instant, she rushed in front of the shadow. The Netherworld Ruins sword carried an indomitable force and stabbed heavily into the shadow's chest. The sword was pressed against the shadow's chest, but couldn't pierce through. Her gaze suddenly trembled. However, it was expected. Origin, chaos. The two powers of order that carried the roar of the sea of stars swept the entire void and nothingness into an endless whirlpool. An impact that was enough to overturn the primordial realm erupted and drowned the two of them. Chapter 1651. The two colored waves rumbled through the void with a frenzied power, turning the impact that could overturn everything in the world into a huge wave that washed over every corner of the space. The roaring waves carried a corrosive power that was even more violent than the chaotic energy that filled the space, turning everything into energy that melted into heaven and earth. It turned into a beam of energy that rushed against the waves toward the center of destruction. Bang! What emerged from the crack that shattered the void was a giant gray claw that was millions of feet long. The earth beneath it cracked, and dust flew everywhere. A giant dark hand that was dyed with countless twisted patterns reached out. A pair of giant hands rapidly approached, suppressing the energy that exploded from the origin of chaos within the range of the two palms. The feedback of the energy that was released into the world made Yin Nuoxing's heart tremble violently. It gritted its teeth and stopped the energy attack that was only halfway launched. It seemed to have calculated the time that Yin Nuoxing retreated and reached out its giant chaotic hand first. However, it seemed to be a little too early, and the energy of the origin of chaos had not completely receded. The moment it reached out its hand, it was shaken by the energy that exploded from the center of the energy. When Yun Nuashing saw this small movement of Yun Nuashing's, he unceremoniously swung his sword. The nether void sword that was wrapped in countless magic circles drew a crazy torrent of energy in the air before Yun Nuashing retreated. The two giant claws caught the remaining energy that Yun Nuashing had released in its hands, causing a violent energy explosion. Yun Nuashing, who had just escaped from the range of the explosion, was thrown thousands of feet away by the aftermath of the energy explosion. It seemed that Yun Nuashing did not intend to follow up with another attack. Yun Nuashing did not know what Yun Nuashing was thinking. It did not use its full strength from the beginning. It was more like, well, Yun Nuashing thought that Yun Nuashing was more like dancing with him. It was more like Yun Nuashing was observing his movements and the way he fought, and so on. Yun Nuashing could not help but think of Yun Nuashing's so-called interest. He did not know if Yun Nuashing was interested in Yun Nuashing or some special or characteristic of Yun Nuashing. These two were completely different things. The void and nothingness were severely damaged by the power of their battle. The cloud continent itself had been turned upside down by the explosion of the origin energy. The small creator's barrier, well, it was still holding on very seriously. However, due to the invasion of the two most unreasonable order forces in the world, the weakened version of the barrier was obviously unable to withstand such indiscriminate bombardment. It was only a matter of time before the barrier collapsed. As for the lives that were sheltered in the barrier, it seemed that not many of them had died yet. Those who should have been attacked by the chaos energy were spared from the pain of being attacked because of the explosion of the origin energy that destroyed the cloud continent. However, they might experience another way of dying, being killed by the origin energy. The two giant pitch-black hands began to melt into the chaos energy. Every inch of this space was filled with energy that could destroy everything. And in the center of the destructive energy, a figure that had completely blended in with the surrounding darkness walked out slowly. It waved its hand and stopped the raging energy storm, annihilating the chaos energy and the origin energy together. Then, it looked at Yun Nuashing from thousands of feet away. "I can't hit it at all." Yun Nuashing frowned and smacked his lips. After all, it was a life of that level. Even if he used all of the origin energy and the origin law, he could only buy himself a chance to struggle in front of it, a chance to fight. If he wanted to kill it directly, forget it. The gap between them might be as big as the void. Once he lost the power of the origin energy and the origin law, he would collapse in an instant. However, he was afraid that it would not come to that. Before that time came, he might have killed himself first. After removing all the restrictions on the energy, he could even use the origin of chaos without worrying about the burden. In other words, he could continue to strengthen himself. Then, on the other hand, it meant that he could play with himself until he died. "Do you want to take a break?" It stood in the distance and spread its hands. Then, it smiled at Yun Nuashing. Yun Nuashing, sure enough, this guy was fighting with the mentality of playing with him. Without saying anything, Yun Nuashing's face turned gloomy. His figure flashed and suddenly appeared in front of the Chaos Demon. Then, he leaped and slashed at the Chaos Demon. Before he disappeared, millions of magic circles were left on the spot. They were gathering and forming a huge word that floated in midair. The magic circles overlapped and condensed into the shape of a cake. It was supposed to be a storm-like attack. However, after rushing to the front of the Chaos Demon, Yun Nuashing suddenly felt that his consciousness and body seemed to be separated. The two of them were in different places. His consciousness was a few seconds faster, but his body was a little slower. Although he swung his sword thousands of times in an instant, it seemed to his consciousness that he was doing it in slow motion. It was the Chaos Domain. Well, he did not need to think too much to know. The Chaos Demon, who was obviously having a playful attitude just now, seemed to be slightly more difficult now. Moreover, it only stretched out its huge claw and blocked all of his attacks effortlessly. The entire space was filled with the sound of metal being hammered. TSK. Yun Nuashing flattened the entire space in front of him with a single slash of his sword. Then, he suddenly widened the distance between him and the Chaos Demon. The magic circles that he had prepared for a long time all floated in all directions. At this moment, the shadows that he had created all appeared from the void. Each of them had a magic circle in their hands. They all raised their hands and unleashed tens of millions of energy blasts toward the heaven and earth that they encompassed. Origin, chaos. The nether void sword that had been charging for a long time violently pierced through the void. The energy that occupied the void fused into the energy blasts, mixing the power of the tsunami into the energy blasts of the storm. Moments later, the shadows that were separated from each other raised the great swords in their hands. Half of their bodies melted into a single beam of energy, stirring up a hurricane of sword dance. Countless sword auras and sword radiance fused within, filling the entire space like a gaudy display of fireworks. At the center of the convergence of billions of energy blasts, the Chaos Demon's body was shrouded in a layer of black barrier that resembled clouds and flames. It resisted the endless energy blasts that came crashing at it like an ocean. From time to time, it raised its claw-like hand and flicked it lightly in the air, deflecting the dangerous sword auras that could split a world apart. There was no expression on its pitch-black face, but Yun Nuashing had a feeling. His instincts told him that the Chaos Demon was quite serious when dealing with such attacks. Whether it was deflecting the sword auras or blocking the energy blasts, the Chaos Demon was using force. However, that thought did not seem to be true. It was probably an illusion. Devour. Yun Nuashing's body appeared like a ghost in the place covered by thousands of fireworks. It quietly appeared behind the Chaos Demon. The Nether Void sword left 3 illusory sword marks that looked like sharp claws as it swept across with all its might. Clang! The Chaos Demon turned around abruptly and also left 5 sharp scratches in the air with its claws. The energy blast that erupted from the collision of the 2 blasts of energy blasted the surrounding energy back a little. The next moment, the Chaos Demon seemed to have given up on its defense and charged toward Yun Nuashing to launch an attack. There was no fancy way to attack. It only used its palms, claws, and fists. All the attacks were carried out using the giant claws condensed from the chaotic energy. Every time it swung its claws, it felt as heavy as the shock of the primordial realm crashing into it. Its body is like the concept. Its power is like the order. A sentence suddenly appeared in his mind. It was a sentence that he had heard when he came into contact with the power of origin. It was probably used to describe the primordial heavenly God and the others. Then, this sentence should also be applicable to the people in front of him. They did not need any so-called moves at all. Their attack and defense methods were carried out using their own essence. The Chaos Demon was the embodiment of the concept of chaos, the embodiment of this absolute power. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped a little bit of information about the primordial heavenly God. However, it should be something that happened very late. The point was that knowing these things now was completely useless. At most, it would let him know why the enemy in front of him was so resistant to attacks. Guidance. Yun Nuashing sneered in its heart and shook its head. Forget it. It did not have this idea at all. It was just playing with him. Right now, it was better not to think about other things. A chaotic reddish-black color flashed across its silver-black eyes, causing the energy that it had released to the extreme and was still flowing smoothly to begin to riot. It changed from a deep pool to a sea that was constantly rolling up huge waves. A low roar came from its throat, and he restrained all the energy. The giant sword in his hand integrated with all kinds of power amplification formations and drew a silver-black cold light in the most powerful manner. It heavily struck the Chaos Demon's giant claws, causing its wild attacks to pause for a moment. Clang! 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 The wildly swinging Netheruan sword controlled the hundreds of millions of wildly dancing energies in this domain. All of them gathered at the place where the two of them collided and exploded indiscriminately. Faced with Yin Nuoxing, who suddenly went berserk, it could not help but let out a soft cry of surprise. It was still full of interest as it watched Yin Nuoxing, who was in a state of madness. A moment later, the chaotic energy surging on its body became denser and heavier. With every collision, countless energy phenomena would explode around the two of them, shattering space and the void. The origin and chaos energies wildly merged and destroyed here. Scram! The energy in his body surged wildly, and with a wild momentum, all of it fused into the Netheruan sword. The force of pulling the stars through the void slammed into the chaos demon's claws. Two types of energy of order roared wildly from the Netheruan sword. The impact of the origin, chaos, was magnified to the point that it could shake the void. An endless amount of energy surged wildly with the two of them at the center. The chaotic energy ball that had transformed into a chaotic state expanded to 100,000 feet in size in just a few seconds. All the shadows that had sealed off this area waved their hands and pressed on the magic circles beside them. The magic circles absorbed and spat out energy in a frenzy. There were even a few magic circles at the edge of the magic circle that cracked due to the sudden surge of energy. They were mobilizing the energy without any regard for the consequences. After that, the chaotic energy ball suddenly dissipated. Millions of magic circles roared together and condensed into crystallized energy beams that smashed towards the two shadows. Boom! Boom! As if billions of stars were destroyed together. The dazzling light that shone dazzlingly spread a layer of light over the world that was already riddled with holes. Millions of chaos anomalies were reflected in the incomparably dazzling light, as if billions of demons were roaring and dancing in the void. Those anomalies did not last for long before turning into pure energy and exploding abruptly. It was as if the stars were shining in the sky, the light scorching the land into a dark gray and incinerating the sea into a puddle. Every time you unleash a mixed impact of order, your energy would be strengthened beyond your limits. Every single time, it retreated and floated lightly to a place 10,000 feet away. It lowered its head to look at the dazzling patterns of origin energy on its dull gray claws. They were still emitting white smoke, and it casually waved its hand to restore them to their original state. However, every time you unleash it, you push yourself closer to the point of collapse. It seems that you have not fully mastered this power. Is it worth it? Those words were so familiar. That person seemed to have said something similar before, but the context of those two sentences was completely different. Yin Nuoxing slowly raised its head. Half of its face was crawling with the mark of origin. Its ethereal voice sounded distant, as if it came from the void. There's no such thing as whether it's worth it or not. If everything in this world has to be calculated like that, I would say that this world is not worth it. I want to act this way, and that's all. The energy in its body had increased by more than 30 times. It spiraled into a powerful hurricane outside its body. The energy rolled over and over outside its body, leaving behind a trail of flowing light that looked like a smooth ribbon. Just one charge had left behind an image and trace of energy. The two frantically flashing figures dug out huge craters in the real world and the void. They collided in the sky and collided on the ground, almost tearing the sky and the ground into several concepts. Facing the increasingly crazy and irritable Yunua planet, the Chaos Wraith became more and more serious in dealing with it. It had already begun to mobilize the chaotic energy that had yet to be destroyed by the origin energy in the world. Even the void was shining crazily under its command, almost tearing open the spatial barrier and pouring into the cloud continent in a large area. Words of sin. Yin Nuoxing's shining silver-black eyes dimmed for a moment. Suddenly, a warm golden light flashed in the deepest part of his eyes. It instantly lit up his dim eyes. The silver-black color almost covered all the colors in his body. Words of sin, soul devour. The whole world was suddenly polluted by this violent energy into gray and silver gray. Time and space froze. It was just that it was frozen in place. It was not still. The black figure that was crazily fighting with him even had part of the silver-black color on its body. Its figure suddenly flashed and appeared in midair. A huge shadow, condensed from divinity, emerged from its body and fell down together with it. Origin chaos. The shadow of divinity suddenly exploded and turned into endless energy. It died, yin-washing into a two-colored comet, and accelerated towards the ground. The two energies of order exploded in the collision, leaving countless cracks in the sky. The comet, formed by mottled colors and annihilation energy, violently collided with the ground, digging a huge hole in the ground. The two-colored energy ball suddenly expanded. Waves of tsunamis that could be seen with the naked eye flattened everything on the ground. The dozens of shadows all held swords in both hands and merged with the energy of the magic circle. They all jumped in midair and slashed at the center of the energy ball. Dozens of destructive torrents tore through the restrictions of space and poured into the energy ball at the same time. The majestic energy burst the space together with the energy ball, revealing the scene inside. It was pinned to the bottom of the crater by hundreds of chains made of mixed order energy. The impact left behind by the origin of chaos left white smoke on its body as if it was burning. However, this was probably not much damage to it. Yin-washing let out a sharp roar. A 10,000-mile-long shadow of energy once again appeared on its swaying body. The shadows all raised the energy swords in their hands. A 10,000-mile-long shadow of energy emerged from their bodies one after another. Then, together with yin-washing, they stabbed their swords into the void. Origin chaos. Huge energy beams fell from the sky and covered the shadows in all directions. They condensed into huge, dark, colorful, or silver-black energy balls on the spot. Indescribable chaotic energy burst out from all directions and instantly covered the place where it could reach. The entire world was drowned in the energy tide. Violent energy screeches crazily rang across the cloud continent. Layers of energy impacts collided continuously in the entire space. The huge destructive energy washed the space back and forth countless times. Boom! Amidst the violent energy tide, dozens of huge ring-shaped sword lights suddenly swept out from the energy balls and smashed into the same place. All the energy contained in the attack was smashed into the same place. A violent sword hum came from the largest energy ball. A huge mottled ring-shaped sword light swept across. The black smoke-like shadow was swept away by the huge force. In an instant, it was hit by dozens of sword lights with the greatest force. It was then slammed heavily into the ground and smashed into a huge crater. He had used primordial chaos 6 times in a short period of time, and the last 2 consecutive explosions were the explosive power that Yin-washing had risked his life to break through his own limits. The energy tide had almost drowned him. At this moment, he was standing at the bottom of the crater, and half of the surging energy in his body had already lost his control. He had lost his precise control and could only pour out the maximum amount of energy in one go. He could no longer use more or less as he wished. "You're almost very weak now." Its voice slowly echoed from above. Yin-washing's breathing became sluggish. She looked up and saw that it was standing at the edge of the crater. The white lacerations on its body were billowing with thick smoke. It only took a few breaths for it to completely recover to its original appearance. It looked at her who was on the verge of madness. She calmly crossed her arms. "But you've done well. In the Order Void, you're the most wonderful and unique person I've ever seen." The countless magic circles and energy shadows that stood in the sky slowly disappeared because of the loss of control. Yin-washing's hand that was holding the sword tightened. Her low voice was trembling with energy. "Are you mocking me?" No, I'm praising you." It chuckled softly. Just as he had seen from the beginning, it did not seem to have a particularly strong will to fight from the beginning to the end. It was just that he had triggered its will to fight in the middle of the battle. In the order void, other than them, there seems to be no one else who can hurt us. You only control their power. You can only count as half of them, so you're not considered as them. Yinuashing breathed out hot air from her mouth. She raised the Netherworld Ruins sword and walked forward. She saw that and put down her arms. She also entered her battle mode. Can you still continue? Of course. Yinuashing met her gaze and raised her head fearlessly. The light in her eyes was like a burning torch. Under her calm appearance, there was an uncontrollable madness and ferocity. I'm still alive. I'm still standing. I can still fight. Before I completely collapse, all I can do is to never stop moving forward until I reach the end of myself. She gently inhaled when she heard that. You're really interesting. But boom! The sudden explosion of energy that shook heaven and earth stunned both Yun Nuashing and herself. Both of them felt that there was something wrong with the explosion of energy. It was not the explosion of the origin energy that destroyed the cloud continent. It was another type of energy, a very strange energy that suddenly exploded. It did not belong to the cloud continent. It was not the origin energy, and it was not the chaos energy. That energy is... Yin Nuashing's eyes trembled slightly. In the concept layer of the rules, an energy blast that was enough to cleanse the world suddenly exploded. It caused the chaos spawns and the chaos energy that occupied the place to collapse in an instant. The few stars and the chaos characters were all turned into ashes. Only a few scattered chaos spawns were left. Seeing that the situation was in their favor, the Order warriors swarmed forward and surrounded the last few chaos spawns. They surrounded them tightly and began the final battle. No wonder Feng said it would take 2 hours. I've never heard of an energy cleansing in 2 hours. Hui looked at the sporadic battle that broke out in the distance. He wiped his forehead and smiled bitterly. It happened to be 2 hours. The concept layer of the rules. There were no more surprises. The following matters would be easy to handle. The chaos energy that occupied the place dissipated. They did not encounter any other obstructions and easily took over the place. Then, they began to build the Order warriors' defenses. I wonder how the reality realm is doing? Jihan Xiao could not help but ask. Let's see. I'm also worried about Feng, Hui muttered. He waved his hand and opened a crack in the concept layer of the rules that led to the reality realm. The scene in front of them suddenly changed. Origin chaos. Boom. Ding ding dang dang. Clang. Everyone. The energy blast that drowned the entire world blinded everyone's eyes. Hui silently closed the crack. Well, he's still going crazy outside. Let's not join in the fun. It'll kill us. Everyone nodded in agreement. Jihan Xiao smiled bitterly. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried about his situation. However, they could not be worried about that kind of situation. When he saw the situation in the reality realm just now, he felt that once he went through the crack to the reality realm, he might be drowned by the surging tide in the next second. He would not even be able to make a splash. He shook his head. Just as he was about to check on the construction of the Order realm, he suddenly caught a glimpse of something from the corner of his eye. He was stunned. What is that? Everyone was stunned for a moment. They all turned their heads and looked at where he was looking. In the depths of the concept layer of the rules, there was a black, cloud-like thing sticking to the wall. It was shining at the edge of the realm of order. If one looked closely, they could see that the cloud seemed to be still rolling. It's not chaos energy, but it gives me a bad feeling. What's that? The middle-aged man frowned and walked over. Wait a minute. Don't go over first. This energy is... Huey's expression changed slightly. A black, cloud-like fog that was shining with a weak red light. This energy could not be... Bang. Chapter 1652. The resonance of destruction that reverberated across the entire cloud continent. The realm of order and the realm of chaos was particularly conspicuous and abnormal in the cloud continent that had been blasted by the origin energy. It attracted the attention of the two people at the same time. They looked at the place where the energy was erupting in the distance and saw a billowing, thick smoke emerging out of thin air. In the thick black cloud, there was a crazy blood-red light flashing from time to time. It looked like a scarlet blood cloud with a black shell. The momentum was vast and extremely terrifying. After the black blood cloud emerged out of thin air, it began to devour the remaining pure energy in this world. However, the amount that it could absorb was actually very little. At this moment, the energy of the cloud continent was basically under the control of the origin energy and the chaos energy. The two energies that stood at the top of order controlled more than 90% of the energy. The black blood cloud did not have much energy left to devour. After all, it could not touch the two big guys. Roar! Roar! The roar that shook heaven and earth was like the sudden explosion of a mountain rock being pierced by violent energy. The black blood cloud rolled rapidly. Huge, strange, and indescribable objects emerged from the blood cloud, like a black spring rain falling on the land. In just a short time, groups of distorted objects that seemed to be put together by the fragments of various races that existed in the void gathered on the land. At a glance, there were not many that had the exact same shape. You called for people, your reinforcements? Yin Nuashing and the Chaos Spectre spoke at the same time. Both of them were stunned. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and muttered, "Those things obviously belong to the side of chaos. I fought them to the death in the void. How could they have anything to do with us?" Yin Nuashing shrugged. "Those things are obviously imitating the method that one of us used to create energy soldiers for battle. They are crudely made. Look at the terrible energy structure. They don't even have any divinity. They don't even have any laws. Oh my God, this thing, other than the fact that it looks a little similar, there are no other factors that match it. They are too fragile to be used as cannon fodder. You have fought with the chaos soldiers that I created. You should know that these things are completely different from the ones I made." "That's true." Yin Nuashing was startled. She suddenly stared at it and said, "So this thing is made to imitate your soldiers of chaos?" He had thought that this thing was the energy split of the component in the underworld. So, in fact, only the energy belonged to the component, and they had made the god destruction mist look like this. By distorting the rules, concepts, and order, it had turned into this ghastly appearance. As I said, this must be the problem with the underworld's standards of beauty. Who knows which idiot made the abyssal death mist spawn into such an ugly thing? Its existence itself was a spiritual attack, used to disgust the enemy. It shrugged again in silent agreement. Yin Nuashing continued to be speechless. Come to think of it, the abyssal death mist spawn was indeed a weakened version of the soldiers of chaos that it had made. It was a half-finished product that had been pieced together by countless parts. You should be thankful that the underworld was not skilled enough. If they had made a chaos soldier that was at least 50% of its original form. Just think of the number of chaos soldiers that were eyeing them outside the void seal. If all of them were replaced with chaos spawns, there would be no way to fight this battle. Forget about him ascending into the primeval god. Even if 1/3 of the warriors in the world of order were turned into primeval gods, they would not be able to fight. Yin Nuashing's body was surging with two types of order energies that were on the verge of madness. Looking into the distance, the abyssal death mist spawn ignored the small creation's barrier that was about to collapse from exhaustion. It appeared directly from the void, and in a few moments, it had formed a sizable dark squad. That's right. Although there were millions of them, like a tidal wave, they were still just a small army. The term Dark Army was only applicable to the endless numbers at the edge of the void seal. Yin Nuashing let out a long sigh. "How about a temporary truce?" It shrugged. "Up to you. I can't stand these fellows who have suddenly barged into my territory. It would be nice if you could clean up the trash while you're at it." Yin Nuashing was speechless for a while. Nothing could be seen from its unmarked face, but for some reason, one could feel that it seemed to be shining brightly, as if it was reminiscing, "What did you think of? A bunch of sneaky fellows. Those fellows from the void of order." It put its hands behind its head and stretched like a human. Then, it said in a lazy tone, "Those fellows who sneakily caused trouble in our battle with them. They would change their location after a fight. A bunch of cunning fellows. But in the end, they disappeared without a trace. No one knows when they disappeared, and we're too lazy to care about those ants. Not interested. Although I don't know how they survived that storm. Since we're not interested, we're too lazy to understand. Sneaky fellows. It seems that the underworld should have participated in that battle back then. Judging from its tone and what it said, it seemed to be the kind of person who would not help either side. Similar to a fence-sitter, they would join whichever faction was easier to get along with, for their own personal goals, for their long-cherished wishes, and so on. But no matter what, they were still life forms of order. Even Carwins had said that Carwins wasn't interested in them. So why? Could it be that Carwins was wrong? That's enough. Successor of Origin, it's not wise for you to dawdle here and fall into deep thought. The matters of the past will be dealt with by the people and things of the past. It's not up to the current you to interfere. It put down its hands and said calmly, "Since I'm interested in you, I'll warn you. You've only officially stepped into the battlefield of order. You haven't reached the extent where you've completely entered it. If you casually come into contact with some superfluous things, your soul will dim." Yin Nuashing was stunned. "What do you mean? Understand it yourself. That's all I have to say. You're not a person of chaos." It said calmly and turned around. Suddenly, streaks of crystals appeared out of thin air and built a forest of crystals that was tens of thousands of feet tall. It came to the top and slowly sat down. It clearly had an attitude of watching from the sidelines and not intending to interfere. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself for a moment. He silently remembered those words, but did not delve into it. At the moment, he was not qualified to touch the deeper things. That was probably what it meant. He turned around and floated towards the sky in front of him. The energy that had been dormant for some time began to surge. Huge magic circles appeared from space. It sat quietly on the top of the forest of crystals and watched as he led 1,000,000 magic circles and carried the might of the Origin forward. After a moment, it raised its hand and looked at it a few times. Then it looked up at the sky and could not help but sigh. In the end, it's still too early. This method won't work. It's a waste of a bunch of chess pieces. I can only find another way. In the endless void and endless time, they were waiting. If they were still here, they were probably waiting as well. What were they waiting for? Perhaps neither of them knew. Phone! There's an emergency in the concept layer. The abyssal death mist spawn has appeared, right? He replied unhurriedly the moment Huey's voice exploded in his mind, leaving Hui stunned. How did you know? Could it be that there's something there too? Me in it? A temporary truce. An uninvited guest had suddenly appeared and interrupted our battle. Yin Nuashing replied and carried billions of firepower towards the abyssal death mist spawn. It said with a hint of relief. It had escaped death. Although I don't know why it appeared to have no will to fight at all. There are some things, perhaps some things that need to be reconsidered. Of course, the position of chaos and order in the grand scheme of things would never be shaken. There would only be exceptions in private situations. After all, this matter was not decided by us. That was right. This was not something they could change. They did not have the ability, the qualifications, and it was completely impossible for them to change such things. From the moment the world was created, chaos and order had already been mortal enemies. Both sides wanted to control the void, and the prolonged battle had split the void into such a peaceful state. The void of order was here, and the void of chaos was outside. The two rarely interfered. However, the peace this time was only temporary, and no one knew how long it would last. Then, as usual, I'll leave the concept layer of rules to you all. Here in the realm of reality, leave it to me. Then be careful. Remember to watch your back. I keep having the feeling that that dark thing is not so kind. Yin Nuashing breathed a long sigh of relief. In truth, he felt that his back was rather safe. He was now 80% sure that its so-called interest was towards him and his existence, which meant that it would not touch him now. Well, even if that was the case, he still had to be careful. After all, this was someone else's domain and not the realm of gods. If things went awry, he would have no other means of emergency rescue. Well then, Let this land burn. He gently raised his right hand and slowly waved it down. The sky suddenly became bright as two massive clusters of concentrated energy manifested behind him. With them, as the center, groups of magic circles flashed out of the void and locked on to the tide of darkness millions of miles away. The two energies burst out from behind him and landed on the ground. They split into four small but very large energy torrents and surged towards the sides of the tide of darkness, circling behind them and cutting the entire area in front of them. Now, there was only him in them in this area. The abyssal death mist spawn appeared abruptly from the center of the cloud continent, where two or three large lands intersected. To prevent them from running around like they were on a stroll, he had first limited the area of the battle. After the area was sealed by energy, the abyssal death mist spawn seemed to have sensed the frenzied hostility of their old enemy. The tide of darkness that was about to surge in all directions like a tide, now all turned their gazes towards him and roared loudly as they charged towards him on all fours. The abyssal death mist spawn that was like a tidal wave surged forward without any order or discipline. It seemed that they did not bring along any individuals who were specially trained to command them. Even a movement of the army was extremely chaotic. The bigger ones were running fast while the smaller ones followed closely behind. However, the distance between them was getting wider and wider. They were a group of drunkards who wandered aimlessly on the side of the road in the middle of the night. They had no sense of reason, their minds were muddled, and there was only a frenzied desire to destroy. Well, it was still a familiar scent. The chaos spawn and whatnot were not on the same level as the abyssal death mist spawn. Once again, he felt fortunate that he did not have to deal with the latter. Speaking of which, there are still people alive on this land. Turning around to look at the surroundings, Yun Nuashing's gaze swept across the area within thousands of miles, sweeping to the place outside of the divided space. The living beings that survived in the cloud continent were actually not killed by the canon art of the origin energy. It was very miraculous. The chaotic energy that was spreading aimlessly was all purified by the origin energy. Other than the people who were still alive being much weaker, not many of them died directly from the spread of the chaotic energy. What a puzzling fellow from the chaos side. Roar! The sound of thousands of troops galloping on the land was getting closer and closer. The air and space vibrated and resonated because of it. The familiar energy scent that came rushing towards him made Yin Nuashing sniff gently. The silver black in his eyes gradually faded. This energy is no longer needed. At the very least, this energy was no longer needed now. The arrays that were arranged in a formation spread out along with the azure wings and the two small sun-like energy clusters, densely covering the space behind him. Yin Nuashing waved his hand lightly, and many arrays of different sizes that were thousands of feet long appeared in the sky before him. After a moment of energy gathering, the tens of thousands of arrays suddenly burst out with a dazzling energy impact. The huge energy impact and a shocking energy phenomenon smashed onto the land in front of him in batches. Countless huge energy explosions splashed on the ground. In just one clash, millions of abyssal death mist derivatives were turned into ashes. The ones that were charging the fastest were all drowned by the energy explosion. Not even a speck of dust could be seen. Array switch. The countless arrays in front and behind him turned in a circle with him as the axis. Half of the huge arrays at the back turned in a circle to the front. The arrays that were originally at the front moved to the back to support the arrays. After a moment of delay, several energy light pillars that were thousands of miles thick fell diagonally onto the ground. It was like a huge energy sword cutting forward. It was almost as if the energy that was not very technical was used to press the dark tide into the void. Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at the place where the thick smoke was coming from. There was a crack in the thick smoke. It was a crack that led to an unknown place. The abyssal death mist derivatives were continuously emerging from within. Even if a group of derivatives were destroyed in one clash, they continued to emerge without fear. Clang! A dull sound came from the energy barrier that sealed off the area. It was as if a city wall was slowly moving on the ground, shrinking the area that was sealed off. The energy that surged in this area was gradually imprinted with the origin energy. There is no pressure here. How are things on your side? Pressure? Not really. I just don't understand. I suddenly saw that they were a little irritable. We did not know whether to laugh or cry. I heard Han Xiao say that that group of people from the underworld might exist in the lower continents of the Cloud Continent, but they're not too sure about the specific situation. Do you think they will come here? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyebrows and frowned slightly. The black nest was located in the void of order, but it was bound and sealed by the god of origin's various methods. Although these things eventually became the chaos demon Shadow's bed. Let's not talk about that first. The origin energy clearly had not completely disappeared, so he was not worried about what the chaos demon Shadow wanted to do. What he did not understand was, how did those fence-sitters from the underworld find their way here? What were they doing here? He could not figure it out. They were probably here for the things they left here. It had appeared beside him out of nowhere and stood shoulder to shoulder with him, giving him a fright. I should say that I saw it. Before you came here, they had already run in, but I sensed that something was wrong. Since they didn't come to the center, I didn't pay attention to them. They had been looking for something somewhere else all this time. It casually stretched out its hand and tapped lightly on the space in front of it, and the land in front of it split into two halves. No, the entire space was split into two halves. Wherever the chaos energy swept through, the abyssal death mist spawns were all turned into particles and dust before dissipating. In the blink of an eye, they were reduced to ashes. The billowing smoke that shrouded the fissure also dissipated. The huge fissure was suddenly exposed to the sight of the two people. This fellow really liked to use simple and crude commands to attack. It tilted its head and looked at him. But their things were all collected by you in the end. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. There was nothing he could do about it. Someone had poked him in the back and asked him to collect them. He could not afford to offend those guys. Other than obediently collecting those things, what else could he do? Although he collected the primordial relics to deal with this guy in front of him, it was obvious that he had overestimated himself when he said that he had a 30% chance of winning. If they really fought, he probably did not even have a 10% chance of winning. Were they? They're not here anymore. Just as he was about to chase after those guys from the underworld to settle the score, its faint words stunned Yin Nuoxing. His eyes widened. They ran away just like that? It glanced at him. I already said that they are a bunch of slippery fellows. They would change places after a fight. Do you still want to chase after them and beat them up? Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He really did think so. He was planning to take advantage of the fact that he was still in the mood to risk his life, to properly squander his strength and settle accounts with them or something. His plan fell through in an instant. So, it's over just like that? Yin Nuoxing stood side by side with it in the air. His expression was as calm as water as he looked at the ruins in front of him. The rift did not continue to spew out the abyssal death mist spawn. As the last spawn disappeared, that familiar presence gradually faded away like a receding tide. The rift also gradually shrank. He could not help but let out a long sigh. He had mustered all his strength and thought that there would be a tough fight. He did not expect that. They had only come to mess around and cause a small interlude. They appeared quickly and left just as quickly. It made him feel like he had punched cotton. The energy that he had accumulated for half a day was wasted. They probably felt the large-scale riot of the primordial power and my power, so they decided to come here and test it out a little. It crossed its arms and stared at the rift in front of it. Those sneaky fellows. Even the slightest movement would attract their attention. However, they did not put themselves in danger and sent cannon fodder to scout the way. Since they are basically all dead, it's time for them to slip away. If they were still here, I would have thrown you over to deal with them. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. He still could not remove the label of extreme danger from this fellow. Apart from that, there was also the label of extreme strangeness. He still had to be more vigilant, lest it suddenly threw him into some corner of a void to do some weird things. So, How did they get here? Yin Nuashing continued, speechless. How would I know? It replied with a very casual tone. I may be monitoring this world, but I don't have the time to care about those small fries. I only want to check on their movements because I was too bored. Would an elephant care about the body language of ants? Yin Nuashing was speechless. It was reasonable, but he still felt that this fellow was asking for a beating. If not for the fact that he could not beat it, he would have rolled up his sleeves and fought it. Chapter 1653. The tide of darkness came and went faster than expected. While Yin Nuashing was competing with himself to save up his energy, those fellows hiding in the dark had already slipped away. It made him feel like he, who was fully prepared for a big fight, was just performing in the air. Speaking of which, the abyssal death mist spawn could not be considered as the tide of darkness. At most, it was just a small splash in the tide. However, they did run quite fast. This world was still in the process of being blasted by the origin energy cannon. From this point alone, one could see just how slippery these unlucky people in the underworld were. This was a world sealed by the origin heavenly god, and even the chaos demon shadow had to say that the two of us can tear the seal apart. Yet, these unlucky people were still able to run so fast. It made one wonder if all their talent points were spent on running away. Probably at that time, I got something from them. It said casually as it glanced at the countless scenes of destruction behind it. I'm curious. You can't get out too? I tried just now. God knows what's going on. Yin Nuashing breathed a sigh of relief. There was no need to hide anything. Is that so? It tilted its head and looked down at the land below. Is that so? It muttered to itself. So, I don't plan to think about it anymore. If you and I work together, we can still break the seal here. It spread its hands and chuckled a few times. It kept looking at Yin Nuo planet. Glancing at the fellow, Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. Don't even think about it. Interesting fellow. You're completely different from those loaches. It seemed to be just a casual mention. As soon as it finished its words, it looked at the other side of the sky and suddenly fell silent with its hands behind its back. Not knowing what the fellow suddenly thought of, Yin Nuashing thought of something else. Those fellows in the underworld could come and go as they pleased. Could the Void Seal really keep them out? He was very curious, but there was no way to verify it. Perhaps there was no need to verify anything. The Black Nest was within the Void Seal. If they could appear here, they could naturally go to other places within the Void Seal in the same way. Probably so. Then, as it said, if those fellows were really here for the primordial relic, could it be that they were also looking for everything related to the primordial relic in the void? That doesn't sound fun at all. No. So, how many things were those fellows busy in the void? They were looking for the core of the primordial realm, looking for the primordial relic, and destroying the void of order. There were too many threads. They were really relying on the power of the abyssal death mist to do whatever they wanted in the void of order. Speaking of which, could they even touch the primordial relic? Were they not afraid of being burned to ashes by the things they left behind? God knows. Maybe the heavenly god of Yuanshi could also do whatever he wanted. Anyway, he could not. He could only be an honest little guy at the peak of the primordial relic. He could not wait to choke those fellows to death with one slap, while lamenting about when he could step into the realm of Yuanshi. Phone, what's going on over there? Why do I see you standing together with that, black thing? Huey's surprised voice rang in his mind. Guessing that the battle on their side should have ended, Yin Nuashing could not help but sigh. Truce. What can I do if I can't win? They don't want to fight with me. Hui, you haven't been summoned to surrender, have you? Yin Nuashing covered his face speechlessly. This guy's imagination was really good. Do you think I'm the kind of person who would be summoned to surrender by some unknown chaos concept life form thing? Hui pondered deeply for a moment, then nodded very seriously, which made Yin Nuashing even more speechless. The former saw his face turn black and hurriedly said, That, isn't it because the order is too unrestrained for you, so? Hey. All right, I know I'm talking nonsense, so what do we do now? What do we do? Yin Nuashing tilted his head and looked at the roar of the primordial relic. The destructive energy that was about to press the entire cloud continent into the void was spreading all over the world. This was a very good question. How would he know what to do? He was very confused now. I don't know. Just sit and wait for death. We can't get out anyway, Yin Nuashing said calmly. Stop fooling around. Hurry up and think of a way. If we are buried here now, how are we going to face everyone outside? Don't disturb me. I'm thinking. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. How could they really sit here and wait for death? The void outside was still bustling. They also had things to deal with and that damned war to fight. However, to be honest, they really couldn't think of any solution at the moment. Although he had more than 100 fully activated primordial relic, primordial laws, and primordial relic, the world core. However, only God knew why this world was ignoring him right now. The laws ignored him, and the order ignored him as well. Moreover, it was definitely not because of the influence of the primordial relic. It was as if this world had executed the destruction order on its own and then very stubbornly stopped it. It would not stop until it killed them as well. If you're really that anxious, why don't you just get out? Outside is the world of order that you miss so much, right? It saw the anxiety of a certain fellow who was sweating profusely and said calmly, "You won't look cool if you force yourself." Yin Nuashing wiped his sweat and soaked his face and palms evenly. He looked at it speechlessly and said, "The result is actually the same whether I get out or not. At most, the way I die is a little different. But I don't know what will happen to the world of order if I let you out." "What? I dare to die, but you don't dare to accompany me?" Hearing that, it laughed softly. After meeting for so long, Yin Nuashing could still hear a hint of helplessness in its voice. "You are really as stubborn as them. No wonder they came to you. I guess. Forget it. It's useless to study this now. If you want to get out but don't want to let me out, there's still a way. For example, you can kill me." Yin Nuashing raised his hands and cupped them. "I'm sorry. I can't beat you. Goodbye." It was slightly stunned. The light on its surface was surging, alternating between gray and dark. It shook its head as if it did not know whether to laugh or cry. After a while, it calmed down and continued to speak calmly. "Then you can just trust them. We are each other's sworn enemies. But if it's not necessary, they won't just throw you guys here to be sacrificed. After all, they're the pinnacle of order. Among them, there are a lot of good people with rotten personalities. Moreover, you, a little inheritor, are also here. They won't do such a meaningless thing." Yin Nuashing looked at it in shock and bewilderment. He carefully took 2 steps back and made a defensive action. "Wait, why are you telling me these things? Are you planning to sneak out while we're thinking of a way out?" It was silent for a few seconds. Then it suddenly laughed. "Aha, you found out." Yin Nuashing's expression instantly tensed up. He looked like he was about to start a fight. Just as he was about to gather his chi, he suddenly said, "I'm just kidding. I can't get out. This is the death order of this world." Yin Nuashing was so angry that he rolled his eyes. He could not help but widen his eyes and stare at the black shadow that was still joking like an old urchin. It ignored him and was immersed in its own thoughts. It muttered to itself, "It's not time yet, so there's no way to get out. It's not time yet, so there's no way to get out. There's no way to leave the void of chaos. There's no way to get in touch with the void of order. There's nothing we can do. So, you can just rest assured." Yin Nuashing's eyes flickered. He stared at it suspiciously. "I'll just accept part of the reason. But why are you telling me this? If you don't tell me, we won't even have a 1% chance of finding it. We'll die here together. We're enemies. Well, from the standpoint of order, we're enemies. But from my standpoint," it paused for a moment. Its eyes swept across Yin Nuashing's body. It gave him goosebumps. He quickly took 2 steps back. "You're just a little inheritor who's a little fun. You're not an enemy. You're the only life that I'm interested in our countless years of history. It's only natural that we want to keep something interesting for a while longer." Yin Nuashing's goosebumps increased with every sentence it said. "I don't want this kind of honor. In fact, that's the case." It shrugged and ignored the shock on his face. It calmly approached him and said in a low voice with a faint smile, "That's right, little inheritor. While we're still interested in you, you should try your best to survive. He, after saying that, its body suddenly disappeared like a dark cloud. Yin Nuoshing was still trembling. Seeing that it had disappeared, his expression kept changing. He had a headache. This was really... He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. No, it was like being favored by the god of origin. This was not a blessing, but a curse. This was a living divine calamity. The death omen star hung above his head, shining brightly. There was only one star at first, but now there were two. He felt that he was not far from death. Oh, that's not right. He was originally in a state where he was not far from death. Now, well, at most, he was on the verge of death. He repeatedly jumped on the path of reincarnation and even danced a coquettish dance. Sigh. He let out a long sigh and turned around. A roaring wave of the origin energy slapped his face, messing up his robe and long hair. His emotions were also messed up like a withered tree in winter. Because this world had fallen into the destructive order of the origin energy, the entire world was now rippling with the aura of destruction. However, after the chaos energy was cleaned up, the turbulence was slightly reduced. However, it was only a smile. There was an even bigger chaos energy in the Buyun Academy. Yin Nuoshing guessed that the origin energy had gone to deal with the guests there. As for the reality world, it would be fine to just throw 2 explosions. After all, there was not much chaos energy. However, this did not mean that it was safe. Just like how the chaos energy was brewing, the origin energy was probably brewing as well. It was surging in a place that they could not see and was frantically preparing to create a big news. As the chaos devil shadow retreated, Hui and the rest felt that it was about time, so they slipped out of the concept layer. The group of people carried many doubts and pounced on Yin Nuoshing. They kept expressing their confusion from watching in the concept layer. Then, they received a piece of news from Yin Nuoshing that made them lose control of their facial expressions. The main point is the Cloud Continent going to be destroyed? The calm Ji Hanxiao's eyes were distorted, and his face was full of vicissitudes. After hearing this sensational news, he looked even more tired. He did not know whether to laugh or cry, and could not help but sigh. Disasters broke out one after another. Compared to what was about to happen, the chaos energy did not seem too serious. What made them even more confused was that the power to destroy this world was led by the origin energy. But why? Like you said, wasn't this world created by the ancient origin spirit? Why is it going to be destroyed now? He could not help but ask. His expression was barely controlled, but the others were slightly out of control. After knowing that the world they had lived in for countless years was suddenly going to be destroyed, even the origin heavenly god could not calm down immediately. Just because there's a little more here, it's not just a little more. Yin Nuoshing glanced at Ji Hanxiao and said helplessly, "It's on the same level as the ancient origin spirit that you mentioned. It's on the same level as them. That kind of thing, you didn't face it directly just now. If you throw it out of the cage, who knows what will happen to the entire void? After all, in this era, this void, the origin heavenly god and the rest are no longer around. Nobody can control a chaos devil shadow that moves freely. In fact, we're still alive now only because Yes, it's in a good mood." Yin Nuoshing smiled bitterly. It's in a good mood. However, he could not say that it was interested in him in front of everyone. That would make everyone uneasy, including Hui and the rest. Sacrificing a small part for the so-called big picture. Unfortunately, this small part has fallen on this world. This decision is wrong for this world, but we can only accept it. There's nothing we can do about it. Yin Nuoshing sighed and glanced at the slightly restless crowd. He continued calmly. The only fortunate thing is that there are still living beings in this world. Try your best to bring all of them along and move them with us. However, this world will still be abandoned in the end. The executors will be personally executed by them. We can't do anything to save anything. This matter has already exceeded the scope of our interference. You can protest. If you're uneasy, you can vent your strength. However, this can't change anything. This is a fact that's written in black and white. Yin Nuoxing patted Ji Hanxiao's shoulder and looked at the others. This is a fact that was written in the judgment by an absolute existence. No life in this world has the power to change this judgment. Their actions won't be delayed for any reason. In the end, the entire world will be thrown into the void and destroyed. All you can decide is to stay here and wait for death, or leave with your own life and the lives of others. Fortunately, you know of our existence in advance and know about the outside world. Even if this place is gone, there's another place for you to set up your nest. With your strength, it's not particularly difficult to recreate a world that's completely similar to the Union continent. Even if it's just a replica, if there's a group of people who need it, they'll probably need a replica like this to stabilize the turbulence in their hearts. Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh and continued speaking calmly. Her tone did not even tremble when she spoke about this heavy topic. Hurry up and move. Time. There's not much time. We don't know how many days we have. It's up to you to decide how many lives you want to bring. Bring as many as you want. If you don't want to, then don't. After all, other than the Union continent, there's also the lower continent that you mentioned, although I'm not sure how many lives there are there. We can only do our best. Ji Hanxiao muttered to himself for a moment. He raised his head and looked firmly into Yin Nuoxing's eyes. As you said, this is our world. As people who have nothing to do with this world, you can disregard the past and come here to help this world. We shouldn't run away from this world. Well, it was as he expected. The middle-aged man whose mind was filled with the idea of saving the world also had the same reaction. Looking at his eyes, one could tell that his mind was working very quickly. He had already begun to think of a way to save the entire Union continent and the lower continent. Yin Nuoxing and the rest did not say anything. At this time, they needed people like the middle-aged man. Having that kind of dream was not considered bad, right? After Ji Hanxiao and the rest left with everyone, the people from the God world naturally stayed behind. We went to Yin Nuoxing's side and whispered, "Feng, didn't you just say that you couldn't find a way to get out? Have you found one now?" At the mention of this, Yin Nuoxing's face was covered in sweat. "No," we gasped. "Then why did you—" A certain lunatic reminded me that the heavenly God of origin wouldn't give up on the life of order so quickly. Moreover, it wouldn't have done so when I was still here. So, there should be a way for us to leave this place safely. As for whether the method is activated or not, I really don't know at all." Yin Nuoxing calmly wiped her sweat and looked at Hui. "It's fine to let them sort out the people first. If there's really no way at all, then we'll just take it that our efforts were in vain. Anyway, we're going to die in the next second. What's there to be calculative about? If it really works, then we'll have saved a bunch of people. Isn't that right?" That's right." Huey's mouth trembled, and he could not help but smile bitterly. He just felt a little uncertain. Evacuating the lives of an entire world, such a big thing, actually had to be decided by feelings. Just thinking about it made him scared. "Next." Yin Nuoxing raised her head and sighed. "Next, we can only resign ourselves to fate." "Well, but before that." Yin Nuoxing stretched his back and yawned. A second later, the azure wings behind his back disappeared with a wallous sound. The vast and mighty energy that overflowed from his body was instantly extinguished. In that instant, his entire body became so transparent that if he was thrown into the water, he would probably disappear without a trace. Hui and Jing Yuanji saw this and hurriedly caught something that was about to melt into the air. Oh, it had already melted. When Jing Yuanji reached out her hand, she only caught a pure white ball of light that was only the size of a head. It was warm and emitted a gentle light. Yin Nuoxing, well, it had melted again. This guy, he's playing with his life too much. We did not know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. This time, it was not as simple as the previous time, when he became weak from tormenting the origin energy. He still had some injuries on his body after the big battle with the Chaos Demon Shadow. On the surface, it might not be visible, but deep down, he was more or less affected a little. He had to rest for a while. At this moment, After the two consecutive battles ended, the chaos energy that permeated the cloud continent completely disappeared except for one or two places that could not be affected. The sun shone from the sky again, the chaos dissipated, and everything recovered. Except for the last four words, everything above was true. However, while some things had ended, some things were not. For example, the people who had been in a state of refuge from the war from the beginning still had to continue their refuge. Furthermore, their form of refuge had changed, from staying at home and not going out to, packing their things and preparing to move. This wave was abandoning the house and fleeing. Furthermore, the people of the entire cloud continent were fleeing together. Oh, right, there was also the lower continent. They were not particularly sure how many Yin-Nuashing people were there, but it should be quite a lot. After all, Jihan Xiao and the others were so busy these few days that they could not see them at all. The news of the disaster that had stopped long ago being replaced by another bigger disaster was jointly spread by Jihan Xiao and the others from the beginning. The joint announcement of all the rulers of the cloud continent was very useful. Although it mentioned a series of things such as fleeing and taking refuge, and although it was said very clearly, it still brought about a lot of fear. Hui and the others could feel a strong wave of thoughts when they were holed up in the ice region. Half of them were panicked, and the other half were helpless. However, with the actions of Jihan Xiao and the others, this wave of thoughts weakened day by day. From this point of view, their actions were quite fast. As for why they were holed up in the ice region and not doing anything, other than the sleeping observers, the others were still resting at this moment. During the war with the chaos, they were at the forefront as the main force of the main force. In fact, when they came down from the battlefield, none of them had the energy to do more superfluous things. When they relaxed, all of them were weak. However, one of the observers was more serious. He simply turned into a ball of light. If they could meet guests in the ice region now, they might see a person whose body reflected the scenery and scenery floating in front of them. They could see the scenery behind the person's figure. They could see through the person at any time, anywhere, and in broad daylight, as if they were haunted. As for the current situation of the cloud continent, it could be said that the largest scale of escape since its birth was currently being staged. Chapter 1654. After the news of the destruction spread like a torrent of information, the reactions of the cloud continent and the lower continent varied greatly. Countless people on the cloud continent who were already experiencing the destruction had already gotten used to, no, they had yet to recover from the shock of the disaster. That's right, they had not recovered from the shock for a month. The chaos energy that shrouded the entire continent had reduced the vitality of all life to the lowest level. Only those who had ascended to the rebirth realm could still maintain their daily activities, while the rest basically stayed at home as little as possible. They could only maintain the minimum level of life activity and walk for a few more minutes before they would be lying on the ground gasping for breath. They barely survived by relying on the magic circles that they had set up to spread the order energy in the city and the protection of the small creations barrier. After enduring for a month, they saw the chaos energy dissipating, the clouds dispersing, and the sky turning bright. Just when they thought that everything was over, there was a sudden boom that informed all life that the second wave of the disaster had begun. They were in a state of confusion from the beginning to the end. However, perhaps it was because of this confusion, and haggard state that they did not have the strength to doubt or question the joint announcement made by the rulers of the Frost Domain. On the other hand, the entire world had exploded, so they had nothing to doubt. The living beings on the cloud continent were basically in a state of confusion and numbness, and it did not take much effort to deal with them. Hui and the others personally felt that the thoughts were slowly weakening. As for the lower continent, well, they were not too sure about that. However, even if we escape today, in the future, Xing LV sighed and muttered to Hui, the outside world is not very peaceful. Although the entire void is so big, but there are not many places that can be said to be safe and reassuring. Even if we escape today, we still have to deal with tomorrow. Hui yawned and spread out his hands, live one day at a time. What was Maple saying again? Mortals live one day at a time, without worrying about anything, while we fight one day at a time. If we lose, we'll die at the front line, and the mortals under our protection behind us will also face destruction unknowingly. You see, the division of labor is clear. Who has the time to care about tomorrow? If you have the mind to think about tomorrow, it's better to think about how to fight now, how to kill the opponent, or how to be killed by the opponent. That's the gist of it. Xing Lu choked and couldn't help but smile bitterly. This was really in line with the way the observer spoke, especially the last sentence, which was simply the finishing touch. As the chaotic energy that sealed the black nest had dissipated, leaving only the origin energy floating in this space, Hui and the rest could also use a higher-level observation method to look down on the entire black nest. This was a big family formed by the brightest light cluster in the center of the cloud continent and countless small light cluster worlds in the void around the cloud continent. It looked like a group of stars surrounding a sun as the core, and there were faint energy lines that were almost invisible between each other, probably through which the communication between them was carried out. Many traces of destruction were found in the lower continents of many small luminous orbs. Some were destroyed by natural causes, while others were destroyed by man-made causes. These were all limited to their own range. However, they also found a few lower continents that were relatively far away. They were all traces of the abyssal death mist. It was estimated that the abyssal death mist derivative that had attacked the concept layer of the cloud continent and the reality realm was thrown from here. They wanted to find the traces left behind by the underworld, but unfortunately, they could not find any traces even after searching the entire lower continent. After all, 5 to 6 days had passed. Even if there were traces left before, they would probably have been devoured by the abyssal death mist by now. After a busy morning, they returned empty-handed. In the end, they had to stay in the energy tower to purify themselves for half an hour. Well, that was why the two of them were chatting now. They were still in the energy tower to purify themselves. Hui was different. He was just looking for an excuse to slack off. He did not need this level of purification. After resting for 5 to 6 days, everyone had almost recovered. At this moment, they were helping Jihan Xiao and the others who were busy in the lower continent. Oh, right. They only talked about the situation in the cloud continent and did not talk about what was happening in the lower continent. However, we felt that there was only one word to describe it: chaos. The origin energy that permeated the entire black nest was very powerful. However, the main body of the chaos energy was erupting in the cloud continent. There was not much chaos energy in the countless lower continents. Even if there were as many lower continents as there were stars in the sky, it would not be enough for the chaos energy to spill out from the chaos specter's sneeze. Therefore, the origin energy did not carry out any destruction on the lower continent. Hence, there was no destruction on the lower continent. At most, it was as if they felt the surge of energy. They saw that the sky was dark, but they did not think that it was going to rain. They just thought that it was nighttime. The cloud continent, including all the lower continents, are locked in by the origin energy. It is better to kill by mistake than to miss one. Even if we let go of the life of order, we must not let go of the foundation. We bathe in the divine energy of the energy tower and said lazily, "There's no way to uproot the whole world. We could just put the whole world into our pockets and leave." TSK, I thought that we could wipe out the lower continents one by one if we speed up our recovery. I didn't expect that we can only use chopsticks to pick up a pot full of sesame seeds. Xing LV was speechless. Why did he feel that the Guardian was hungry now? Maple hasn't recovered yet. I don't know if the origin energy can go through the back door and think of another way. Aha! It should be impossible. We could not help but smile bitterly. The observer who loved to play with his life was still asleep. However, they could talk to each other occasionally. In the past few days, they had talked to each other twice. The first time, they told each other that there was less than a month left. The second time, they told each other about the Chaos Spectre. For the time being, they could treat it as an existence that could destroy the void of order with the power of one person. Moreover, its energy could spread to anywhere. Unless there was a barrier built by the origin heavenly god, no one could trap it. Oh, so that thing that was as black as poor quality ink with a hint of grayish tint was a gigantic bomb that would tear everything apart wherever it went. That was good. They definitely couldn't throw it out, not even a little bit. Even if all of them had to die here, they definitely couldn't let it out of this cage. However, that was a plan for the worst-case scenario. Judging from the current situation, they did not know what it was doing and what it was doing. The tickets are unlimited. We just have to rush it. We let out a long sigh. It was enough to stuff the people into the created space, but it was not enough to just plug them in. They still had to make arrangements, so they had to rearrange the buildings. However, there was no way to take away anything related to the foundation in this world. The houses, the ground, and even the created space in this world could not be taken away. They could only bring some small items with them. Under such circumstances, if they were to throw them into a new space, they would have to start all over again. Jihan Xiao and the rest were already overwhelmed with work just to keep the people in. They could only spare a small portion of their time to deal with the matters in the escape space, such as urgently building a city or something like that. No wonder the progress is slow. However, life is still more important. I have a good idea. It should be able to get the people from the lower continent to cooperate. Xing LV suddenly thought of something, then hurriedly tossed around in his soul. Hui was slightly startled. What are you doing? Xing LV chuckled for a while. After about 5 minutes, he raised his head and waved his hand to send a spiritual message to the Lord Guardian. Look. We looked inside. After about 5 to 6 minutes, he responded with an "oh," and conveniently threw it into the minds of Jihan Xiao and the others who were busy in the lower world. Hey, spread this out. It should save a lot of effort. What's this? Jihan Xiao patted his head. The image was directly transmitted to his mind. It was a short image that was showing and demonstrating something very dangerous, the Abyss Death Fog. That's right, it was the Abyss Death Fog. They only had one experience in dealing with the chaotic energy, so they did not have much memory. They could only use the Abyss Death Fog to make up for it. However, just the Abyss Death Fog alone was enough. Its existence was the same as the concept. Its existence was the same as the rules and order. When they first saw it, they even treated it as some kind of concept that was neither energy nor phenomenon. In fact, it was something that coexisted with energy and concept. If they did not know that it was a type of God's destruction power, they would not have treated it as an energy. What Jihan Xiao and the rest saw was the countless changes brought about by the Abyss Death Fog. He saw the stars in the world become distorted under the influence of the Abyss Death Fog, becoming grotesque and weird. Under the influence of its energy, it opened its ferocious claws that were enough to tear the galaxy and even the void into pieces. He saw the pure energy in the world being polluted by the Abyss Death Fog and turned into black ink blobs and clouds. A scarlet flash was like an eyeball, a core that flashed with endless crazy colors. He saw the pure energy that was very quiet a second ago suddenly spit out the Abyss Death Fog's derivatives without warning. In less than 10 seconds, thousands of derivatives appeared. When they came out, they began to release their own pollution and began to transform their birthplace bit by bit. Especially in the last scene of the image, they saw a world of light that was completely polluted by the Abyss Death Fog, rushing towards a world group and self-destructing crazily. Endless energy sprinkled over tens of thousands of worlds of light, and finally turned everything in the countless worlds into carriers of the Abyss Death Fog. After becoming their claws and teeth to attack the void of order, the soul transmission suddenly became dead silent. A silent death. Just a second ago, the world group was still quiet. Suddenly, an uninvited guest appeared, and in an instant, everything changed. The entire process, they didn't know if it was really as shown in the video. The entire process took less than a minute, but as long as it had this kind of power, it was enough to make all living beings tremble in fear. Is this the world you're facing? Jihan Xiao murmured in a low voice. Hey, we didn't let you see this for you to sigh in a low voice. Hui waved his hand and said. Hui waved his hand and urged, when you go out, you will have countless time to lament about this terrible world. But now, tell this damn thing to those who don't want to run. Tell them to hurry up and leave. If they don't leave, they will die. Jihan Xiao and the rest could not help but smile bitterly. After this fellow came back to life, his voice had returned to its original cheerful tone. Unknowingly, it also made everyone secretly heave a sigh of relief and cheer up. In short, the image was a very heavy one. They had countless similar memory fragments in their minds. Some were more serious, and some were memories of resisting the abyss of death mist. After fighting for 100 million years, their minds were filled with these things. All kinds of ways to die in the world of order and ways to destroy the abyss of death mist filled their minds. If they really wanted to talk about it in detail, pouring a cup of tea and talking about it on the tea table for a year and a half was just the beginning. Perhaps because it was too heavy, Jihan Xiao and the rest actually hesitated for a few minutes before deciding to release the image. This time, the flood of information that bloomed in the lower continent mentioned this crazy, destructive energy. Perhaps they were shocked by the content of the image, or perhaps it was because the rulers of the cloud continent had such a heavy expression that it was about to rain. Until the end of the image, no one caused a commotion. Hui and the rest did not know what happened after that. After all, the image was not as shocking as being on the scene. However, if the people here were really on the scene, they probably would not even be able to save a speck of dust. At this moment, they could only continue to make do with their lives. Anyway, after hearing a few people heave a sigh of relief, it seemed that there was some effect. Hui vaguely glanced in the direction of the lower continent and noticed something. After the information was carried by the flood of information, countless lower continents fell into a long silence. Then a sudden shout came from somewhere, or perhaps it was just the sound of something falling on the ground. Everything suddenly entered a very strange state. It was so orderly that it was hard to imagine. Calmness, order, unity. It was as if the chaos and trouble caused a Jihan Xiao, and the rest was just an illusion. This was the true appearance of a life in this world. Isn't this too bizarre? We could not help but scratch his head. He could not understand the changes in this at all. He could only guess that there was some faint hint and order from a high divinity mixed in the flood of information. We did use some hints and guidance, but we didn't expect the effect to be so good. We don't know if the hint was more effective or if the image scared them silly. Jihan Xiao answered honestly. It was indeed a very good way to deal with this situation. It could save a lot of trouble. However, there would be a lot of obstacles if they used the hint directly. After all, it was just a small hint. Firstly, it was not hypnosis. Secondly, it was not an illusion. If they wanted to complete the hint without affecting everyone's normal mental state, they would need to supplement it with a strong dose of medicine. Coincidentally, they delivered it and the effect was immediate. However, the appearance of this order was too strange. It was so quiet that it made people suspect that these hundreds of millions of lives had become walking dead puppets. If it was not for the fact that they still had their own spirit and soul and were still active, we would have thought that there were puppets all over the continent in an instant. Some of the higher-ranking individuals began to help the ordinary people. They helped to settle the countless refugees in the escape space by building houses or pacifying the people. However, even the rebirth state experts who had the ability to build buildings from the ground could not withstand millions of buildings from the ground. We had seen a guy who had just entered the rebirth state building houses until he was foaming at the mouth. That kid was really desperate. During the process, there were a few small theaters that people could not help but stare at. For example, in a lower continent that the middle-aged man was in charge of, he opened the entrances and exits all over the world and got people to help organize the evacuation. He himself came to the largest city and brought people away. When he brought the last person away, he saw with his own eyes that the powerless young man suddenly turned around and knelt down in front of the empty city that was only left with dust and rubbish. He kowtowed 3 times and then turned around to leave without any hesitation or sadness. He walked forward fearlessly. No one knew what Yanua Planet would think when they saw these images. They had also experienced a large-scale evacuation activity. The Pantheon world during the 139th era was really. However, the two situations were different, and the way they dealt with it was different. It was normal for the results to be different, but the difference was really huge. Based on the current situation, there were no idiots who chose to commit suicide and cause trouble in the dark. There should have been, but they were all dumbfounded by the images and hints. As such, the secret tricks that Jihan Xiao and the rest had left behind could not be put to use. Everything was going so smoothly that it could not be any smoother. Just like what was said earlier, the tickets were unlimited and they only needed a little time to rush it. Time. If anyone told him that time was squeezed like a sponge, he would definitely write that person's name in Maple's little notebook and then gather the power of the God's world to send that person to the chaotic void to set off fireworks. They helped to solve the problem of space. As for the problem of manpower, because they already had many people helping to organize the evacuation and internal reconstruction, they were not short of manpower for the time being. In short, the entire world was moving rapidly except for a certain person who was still in a deep sleep. However, under such circumstances, half of the time had passed, and they had only evacuated 1/3 of the lower continent. The main problem was that there were too many restrictions on the methods they could use. They could not use this and that, they could not move this and that, they could not bring that away. They could only use the slowest and dumbest method, which was to bring away people one by one. At most, they could open the door as wide as possible. From bringing away people one by one, they could bring groups of people and then hundreds of groups of people to escape together. Using the back door? Forget it. What kind of back door could the heavenly god of Origin's defense be used to trap the most dangerous and darkest existence in this world? If there was, it would have done it first. Why would it wait for them to do it? And the only one who could possibly use the back door was still a ball of light at the moment. Squeeze the sponge and dry the sponge. We still can't reach it. We could not help but smile bitterly as he watched groups of people slip into the spatial rift. The time was clearly in front of them. Half versus 1/3. What could they do? They did not have any other way to increase their speed. Oh, right. When they evacuated, they also took the beasts, animals, and demons of the lower continent with them. It was all in passing. The speed of their escape was actually twice as fast as the speed of the humans. Hui saw with his own eyes that the lifeless lower continent was devoured by an explosion of origin energy after being left there for 2 minutes. Not even a piece of wood was left in the entire lower continent. At this moment, standing in the void and looking down at the place, one would find that the lower continent, which was like a star surrounded by stars, was now greatly reduced. The stars in the night were extinguished one by one, and even the light of the cloud continent in the center was gradually dimming. Phew! We breathed a long sigh of relief and looked up at the sky. Phone! Hurry up and wake up. Otherwise, we can only give up this 1/3. In the ice domain, in the room of an observer that was forgotten in the corner of the cloud continent, it was still the same room and the same bed. At this moment, there was a ball of light nestled in the dim room. The moonlight at night could not dispel the darkness in the room too much. Instead, the light emitted by the ball of light itself provided the room with light, dispelling half of the darkness. The silence lasted for a while. Suddenly, the light that filled the room dimmed a lot. The light seemed to be afraid of something, or as if it was blocked by something vague. A moment later, a cloud of gray and black appeared in a place. From a void, a vague human figure condensed. It walked forward and stared at the ball of light. There was a faint pressure in its eyes, as if it was a natural pressure that flowed out naturally. However, the latter could not feel it all. Looks like it's defenseless. Really, I don't feel the passion from the battle at all. It sat cross-legged in the air and stared at the motionless ball of light for a long time. Suddenly, it stretched out its hand, and the chaotic energy floated out like a cloud. It floated lightly but quickly towards the ball of light. Within a few seconds, it touched the ladder. The ball of light suddenly released a bright light. Mottled colors mixed in the light, dispelling the approaching cloud. It spread out its hands and said, "That's why I told you that I can't do it, but you insisted that I come. You bunch of people who don't know how to be elegant at all. You can even think of doing things like forcing people to do things against their will. How boring. Aren't you afraid that after it's done, the little inheritor will explode and eat all of you alive? Well, you're still more interesting. I didn't expect that their power would spontaneously move to protect you. Moreover, the self-constructed part is still evolving and changing. Primordial void, huh? I can't believe I can still find such a thing at this time. Interesting, really interesting. I've already been here. I'm just here to go through the motions. I have to get out of here quickly so that I won't be targeted by their gaze." It muttered to itself for a moment. Then, it turned back into a cloud of gray and disappeared into thin air. The silence in the room lasted for a while. Then, an illusory white light floated out of the ball of light. It was blurry as if it was cast by light. Not a single part of it could be seen clearly. It illuminated the entire room as if it was daytime. The ball of white light rotated in place for a moment before quietly retreating back into the ball of light. The light in the room dimmed, and everything returned to normal. The ball of light was still in its slumber, and there was no movement from it. Chapter 1655. While the Yunwan continent and its associated worlds were plunged into the greatest chaos since the birth of life, in another place that was also a continent, sunlight was shining through the clouds that covered the sky at this moment. There was a huge hole in the huge sea of clouds, forming a spacious sea of clouds that connected to the sky. One could clearly see that the orange and light red sunlight over there was brighter and more intense. In a place surrounded by flowers in the origin continent, Yin Nuoxing, who was sitting in front of a tea table, suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. He vaguely felt that something had happened. Try to trace this feeling carefully. Well, it was a waste of effort. He gently put down the teacup in his hand. In addition to the teacup in his hand, there were 3 other cups of steaming hot tea on the table in front of him. It was just that these 3 cups of tea had not been touched. They had been placed here for several hours, or perhaps it had been several days. They were still steaming hot, waiting for someone who would not come here. When he woke up, he was already sitting here. There was no one in sight. The origin continent was still the origin continent, but there was no sign of life. Their figures had disappeared, and there were no traces of large-scale changes on the main road. Other than the teacups on the table in front of him that seemed to indicate that there was someone here, there were no other traces of activity. But even so, he did not know how long he had been sitting here, but he did not see anything visiting this place. He carefully sensed that there was no one lurking in the dark looking at him. It seemed that there was really no one here. Picking up the teacup and taking a sip of the light green tea, Yin Nuoxing let out a long sigh of relief. Slightly bored, he leaned back on the chair and muttered to himself, "It's so boring. Why did the soul and body reconstruction take so long? I don't know how many days have passed. If I wait any longer, the Yunwan continent will explode." He was just muttering. The reason why he appeared here this time was unknown, and there seemed to be no way to get out at the moment. These were actually not that bad. He was not someone who could not stand loneliness. Anyway, only half of his consciousness could still move at this moment. The reconstruction of the body and soul would be over after a while. The main reason why he was restless was the other 3 cups of tea in front of him. Yin Nuoxing stared at the 3 cups of steaming hot tea and could not help but smile bitterly. He did not know if they did it on purpose. They purposely put the tea here and found a place to hide. As for why they did it, who knew what they were thinking? Maybe they were simply playing tricks on him or something. After all, he was the oldest old urchin in the De Yuan realm. Even if he was played, he would not be surprised. Yunwan continent. He pulled himself up from the back of the chair and stretched his arms in front of him. After a while, he lazily lay down again and could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. Forget it. I'll leave the matters over there to Hui and the others. They should be able to handle it. The main thing was that it was useless for him to worry about this matter at this moment. At this moment, his main body was only left with a ball of light that condensed his consciousness. He could not count on a ray of light to save the world. At most, he could, when night came, he would hang in the sky and provide some light that even the sky could not illuminate. Achoo! He suddenly sneezed loudly, causing the ground to tremble. He raised his head and looked around blankly. He rubbed his nose in confusion and then ignored the sudden sneeze. At this moment, they were in the Yunduan continent, at the place furthest away from the Wellspring continent, where the king's palace was located and the Biyun Academy was located on the Biyun continent. It was also the place where the origin energy was the weakest. They had set up a grand formation made of energy towers. They had built a temporary stronghold here to defend against the explosion of the origin energy when the time was up. They had also moved the small pillar of creation from another place in the Yunduan continent. Now, they were constantly closing the small barrier of creation in the hidden space. Apart from using it as a defensive formation, they had also used rules and dimensional power to weave a spatial node, directing all the exits and entrances from the faraway lower continent to this place. They could open a door and walk out, find a lake, jump into it, or even walk out of a city gate, leave a block and stumble into a hole. As long as every living being moved through a frame, it would count. After that, they would be prepared to receive the refugees from the lower continent. But even if it was convenient, they still had to run across the lower continent one by one and alter the dimensional rules and concepts of the lower continent. After that, they would have to leave the lower continent by themselves and run to the second lower continent. There was no doubt that it was much faster than running across the lower continent one by one and waiting for people to enter. However, it would still take time. This was a solution they finally came up with after 2 or 3 days. It wasn't difficult since they were dealing with a group of beings with relatively weak laws and order. They didn't need to use powerful laws to interfere on a large scale. All they had to do was throw a torrent of information at them. Thanks to this, the speed at which they evacuated the lower continents was much faster. But as for whether they missed anyone, logically speaking, that should be the case. However, they didn't have a better solution. Purely using the spatial laws to change and mobilize such a large scale was the limit of what they could do at the moment. All they could do was to let everyone know about this matter and send 1 or 2 people to check the lower continents one by one. If they missed anyone, they could quickly bring them back. At this time, on top of the huge defensive array, there was a dense ball of energy tens of thousands of feet in diameter hanging in the air like a small sun. The energy it emitted was continuously communicating with the void, connecting with the small pillar of creation. The descending energy turned into a solid barrier that shrouded the huge defensive array with a radius of 10,000 miles. Bright little balls of light could be seen in the sky a little further away from the array. They were smaller than the small sun, only 1,000 feet in diameter, and the largest was no more than 2,000 feet in diameter. Together, they seemed to form a complete star system, sprinkling starlight over the land like the stars. A star system with 20 stars had the grandeur of an entire galaxy, and it looked quite magnificent. The defensive array is almost 70% complete. The remaining energy towers will be completed in 5 days, and the array will be completed in 6 days. The ring of origin that condenses Lord Maple's origin energy has entered the charging state in advance. Increase the energy that connects with the void. Don't let it collapse due to loss of control. Below the star cluster that pretended to be a huge galaxy, but was actually just a star system, above the energy tower array, in this area, the sprinkling starlight seemed to have touched something, and there was a faint distortion and slanting movement. If one looked carefully, one could see that there was a huge ring-shaped structure that was one size larger than the defensive array below. At this moment, it was in a hidden state, and its surface was covered with dense starlight, as if the light of the stars had dyed it with the wonders of the galaxy. Hui looked up at the giant ring and murmured, "The power left by Maple is a primordial construct that forcibly projects a real entity in the world by distorting reality, rules, concepts, and order. This thing, no, is this thing really useful? TSK. Who cares if it's useful or not? I can only brace myself and use all the methods I can think of. What else can I do if I don't use it? I can't just sit there and wait for death. He felt that the impression of the heavenly god of origin that the chaos demonic shadow mentioned was not very reliable. It's better for me to prepare my own defense first. In the inner circle of the ring of origin, there were countless small rings that slightly left the main body. They drifted alone in the space for a moment and then retracted back into the main body, as if a huge creature was inadvertently stretching and blinking its eyes. Every time he saw the small ring tremble, we could feel the rich origin energy surging, and the space in the central area of the ring would fluctuate as if it was being crushed by a huge mass. It was also in the state of gathering energy, so he could feel the constant fluctuations in the space and the void around it. As long as the central area of the ring did not suddenly explode with a bang, they could continue to stay calm. A mere spatial turbulence was child's play. So, what's the situation of the evacuation in the lower continent? Hui turned his attention to Jihan Xiao and the rest. The speed is indeed much faster. Jihan Xiao's voice was slightly hesitant. Through the soul, Howard could see that he was frowning. But according to this speed, even at the last moment, there's still a considerable number of people who can't do anything. Just give me a rough estimate. 1/10th? Or 1/12th? Or 1/20th? Or even 1/30th? Although we did not know why there were 4 answers, he still heaved a sigh of relief. No matter which number it was at least better than 1/3 of the previous number. He knew that there were errors in the numbers, but he did not expect there to be so many. It seemed that he had underestimated the heavenly god of origin's idol. Ba deliberately created space. Its essence should be a purer existence than the current void of order, so it could evolve into so many worlds. This was something that they did not expect and were completely unprepared to deal with. Based on the number of creatures in the entire Black Nest, it should be half to 1/3 of the creatures in the heavenly realm. It was an extremely large number. Try your best. Hui sighed again. Right now, we can only try our best. Try your best to take away as many lives as you can. But when that time comes, no matter how we feel, we can only seal it. I understand. Jihan Xiao nodded. They had already mentally prepared themselves for this. They all knew that this was a reality that would definitely happen. Now, they had to give it their all to minimize the number of sacrifices that were destined to be made. Even Fei Yu was risking his life to hug that old man. Hui waved his hand and ended the soul communication. He raised his head and looked at the Ring of Origin. He tilted his head and looked at the Heavenly Realm's warriors who were in charge of stabilizing the Ring of Origin. How's the Ring of Origin? It's very stable. The energy condensation and output are smooth. It did not get sucked into the chaotic whirlpool because of the turbulent energy of the cloud continent. Hui nodded and turned to look at Jing Yuanji. How's Feng? Jing Yuanji was silent for a moment. Her jade hand touched her shoulder lightly. A ball of bright white light suddenly appeared. She held it in her hand and handed it to Master Hui. Master Feng is still the same. I can't sense the situation at all. It seems that he won't be able to recover so quickly this time. Hui knocked on his head with a headache. It was really fun to play with one's life for a while. If he kept playing with his life, he would lose himself. This time, even he could not predict when Feng would be able to recover. Time quietly came to the second last day of the origin energy explosion. Perhaps it was because time was gradually approaching the end. The turbulent origin energy in the Black Nest was no longer suppressing its movements. The entire void was shaking with the destructive movement of the divine energy. In the Black Nest, other than the cloud continent, the bright star-like lower continent had almost completely disappeared. Only a few sparks were left. However, although they were sparks, if one really looked up and counted them carefully, there were probably thousands of them. In addition to the origin energy, there was also the chaos energy. The chaos energy that was trapped in the endless mountains of the Bayun Academy was also planning to make a big news recently. The time it broke the seal and the time of the origin energy's riot was the same day. At most, It was just a matter of time. However, who was the first and who was the last was a very critical problem. If the chaos energy exploded 1 or 2 hours earlier, they could only hold on to this defensive formation and resist to the death. Obviously, that was not something fun. Worried that the seal on the chaos energy would be broken first, we brought some people to reinforce the seal. However, it was just a drop in the bucket. At this moment, they could clearly feel the violent movement of the chaos energy from hundreds of miles away from Feng's barrier. It was daunting. They did not know what kind of changes the chaos energy had gone through inside. Staring at the barrier, they could see the barrier expanding from time to time. From this point, they could see that the movement inside should be 100 billion times stronger than the movement on the barrier. Even the endless rules of the endless mountains might have been occupied. Although the movement was very big and the energy was surging, it did not release any energy on the surface, nor did any destructive movement appear in advance. It was as if it was still silently accumulating energy, silently suppressing and gathering all the energy. The whole process was as quiet as a mass grave in the middle of the night. Hui carefully used his Yuanshi realm energy to probe the inside of the barrier. The result was completely as he expected. The turbulent chaos energy had been cultivating in that place for as long as 2 months. Now, it was like a fierce beast that was about to break out of its cage. It was full of energy as if it had eaten a raw dragon. It was very No, he wanted to say that it was very irritable. The ball of energy he threw in did not last for 7 seconds. The process of dissipating was as if it was torn into pieces by a pack of wolves. This should be the weakest part, but it was enough to make his probing energy disappear instantly. He thought that even if he held up the strongest barrier, when the core of the chaos energy rushed over, it would not last more than a minute. Fortunately, Maple's origin barrier was very effective. Although it had been ravaged by the chaos energy and was trembling from time to time, they also hurriedly set up more energy barriers in this place. The space between each energy barrier was distorted by time and space, and then mixed into a pile of mud. This kind of simple arrangement that could be destroyed with a finger, hopefully, it would have a little bit of effect. It would be good if it could block for a second. One barrier could block for a second. They had set up hundreds of barriers, so no matter what, they should be able to squeeze out 10 minutes. This was already their limit. If they went on, the entire space would become a mess, and the effect would plummet. Lord Hui, look over there. A celestial warrior suddenly raised his hand and pointed to the edge of the barrier. Hui looked up, and his cheeks twitched. Outside the thick layers of barriers, there was a figure with a human figure. Its whole body was pitch black with a bit of gray color. The chaos energy spiraled around its body like a spiral and was suspended in midair. It was the Chaos Spectre. The figure that had disappeared for a month suddenly appeared at this moment. F***CK. Quickly retreat and return to the defensive formation. This is an order. Don't look back. Hui was shocked and couldn't help but curse. He waved his hand and pushed the celestial warriors away. The latter and the others knew that they might only be a hindrance if they stayed at this moment. With a sullen face, they cupped their hands and suddenly retreated. Hui trembled and took a step forward. Then he saw the Chaos Spectre's body tremble slightly, which made his breath stagnate. Just when he thought that the Chaos Spectre was going to destroy the barrier that they had painstakingly set up with a finger, it suddenly came in front of him. Its sharp face, without any details, looked at the former. "It's you. How is he?" Hui was shocked and subconsciously made a blocking gesture. We heard the Chaos Spectre suddenly speak. He was stunned. The content should be a sentence of concern, but when it came out of its mouth, it was flat and cold without any emotion. We was not sure whether it wanted to hear the answer of "Maple is better" or "Maple is dying" or something like that. "There is no change." After thinking for a moment, we said honestly. Then he stepped back and took out the guardian shield. In an instant, he entered his strongest state. "What do you want to do?" It casually glanced at Hui and said, "I'm just walking around the back garden of my house. You won't be blocked by a stone, right?" Hui was speechless. This guy didn't treat him as a human. Its indifferent attitude was without any hostility. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't know if it had already heard the news it wanted to hear. It stopped and looked at the layers of barriers. Then it turned and disappeared, leaving no words behind. What is this guy doing? Hui smiled bitterly and casually rubbed his face with his sleeves. His clothes were soaked. Just by standing in front of it, he felt an irresistible pressure of death exploding in front of him. In less than a minute, he almost exhausted all the strength in his body. He didn't know how Maple persevered while fighting with this guy. He looked at the barrier, was silent for a moment, and turned to leave. There was less than a day left before the end. To be more specific, it was 3 to 4 hours. Including the error, it might be a little shorter. The evacuation of the Cloud Continent and the Lower Continent had basically ended. Just like the data obtained by Jihan Xiao, more than 90% of the lives in the Black Nest had been evacuated. They were placed in the hundreds of spaces they built together, hundreds of temporary and simple shelters. The high-level existences were helping to build the basic buildings in the spaces. In the shelters, there was a considerable number of high-level existences in the rebirth state. We felt that almost all of the high-level existences in the Black Nest had gathered in these hundreds of spaces. There shouldn't be anyone who didn't come here unless they wanted to die here. It seemed that there was indeed such a person who accidentally triggered the space rule they set up and was teleported into the defense formation. Then, they ran to a corner of the Cloud Continent and waited for their death. Regarding this, there was nothing much to say. As long as they could understand, it was fine. As for persuading them, they didn't have the time. People in this realm were more or less stubborn. They had their own insistence. Since they had made up their minds to sleep here, there was an abundance of high-level existences. With their help, it wouldn't be difficult to rebuild the city. The crudely built city solved the urgent problem of settling the refugees. They didn't need to worry too much about the situation in the shelters. What they really needed to worry about was the situation outside. For example, the middle-aged man who was still desperately running with his people even when time was running out, and Jihan Xiao and the rest. Even if it was just one person or one more person, they would still want to run with them. Even so, the limit was the limit. It was a cold and irreversible number. It would eventually be fixed at a boundary that could never be crossed. Time is running out. The Ring of Origin is starting to resonate. The defense formation's energy is fully activated. The space, rule, and concept will be completely shut down in 1 minute. Damn time. Damn it, the middle-aged man roared. He stared at the hundreds of floating stars in the void and clenched his fists so hard that he almost crushed himself. Stop scolding. Let's retreat quickly. Jihan Xiao hurriedly pulled him and ran. They had already exhausted all their strength and set the time for their retreat at the last minute. If they left now, they wouldn't be able to return to the defense formation. In the following period of time, the seal of Buyun Academy would explode at any time. He slowly opened his eyes. The images that surrounded him reflected the things that were still happening in the world. Those were the scenes of the lower continents that had not been evacuated in time. There were mortals, cultivators, and, similarly, there were also high-level existences. The number was still in the hundreds of billions. It was a place that they could not reach. Batches of silhouettes fell miserably into the space of the defense formation. They were Jihan Xiao and the others who came back at the last minute. In the last 10 minutes, they managed to save a third of the lives of the lower continents. It could be half, but it would not be more than that. Sir Hui, the chaotic energy is boiling. The origin energy of the Black Nest is moving. Rumble, a distant and ancient rumbling sound came from the void, from the vibrations in the space, causing the ground beneath their feet to tremble. There was no need for a report. The breathing of the world itself was telling them that it was about to be destroyed, that its end was near. Every tremor, every turbulence was a struggle, a prayer, a declaration. Even at this moment, he could see the people who were desperately rushing here from the countless images. Even if they just touched the edge of the cloud mainland, they would be transported into the defense formation. Every dash was an attempt to escape from the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Every distance, I'm used to it. Hui raised his head and exhaled deeply. Although I can't be as calm as Feng, I'm completely used to it. I've experienced it many times. We have to be responsible for the people here. We have to be responsible for evacuating here and escaping here. We have to be responsible for ourselves and the order of the void. If we're willful, our hands won't be able to hold on to anything. 7 divine halos slowly appeared behind Hui. He was silently counting down the last seconds in his heart. Even at this moment, there were still some people who fell out of the space transportation in the defense formation in a sorry state. They then cried tears of joy. Time's up. Formation, seal. Enter a completely sealed state. From now on, the internal space is not allowed to exchange any information or energy with the external space. Time's up. Defense formation, seal. 7 shining divine halos floated in midair and cast a sacred light. They isolated the space and the entire world. At the same time, they also announced the coldest order of destruction to the entire world. They were not the executors. They were just bystanders. There was nothing they could do. Chapter 1656. What did it feel like to close a door? Actually, there wasn't any special feeling. Turning around to close the door gently, turning around to slam the door, slamming the door with one's back, slamming the door with one's foot. There were many ways to do this. Even if one used one's head to slam the door shut, no one would say anything. What he wanted to say was that the action of closing the door was actually the most common and effortless action. Even if, when the meaning of closing the door was to close the last door to life for hundreds of billions of lives, it was just the action of closing the door once. What he needed to do was to close the door gently. There wasn't much energy movement, and there wasn't even a scene of energy turbulence. The surroundings were still mixed with tears of joy in a heavy atmosphere. However, after Huey's words, the defense formation had sealed off all paths of communication with the outside world. On the other hand, it was as if the word demolish was written on every other place except for this place. The people and houses would be demolished together, and the countless lives that were left here would turn into dust in the void. Independent rule, cut off all connections with the void, solidify the concept and order, seal complete. Following another sentence, the space inside and outside the defense formation had become 2 completely different spaces. The space was separated and had lost its exchange with the void and order. It had lost its connection and became an absolutely sealed, independent space. This was only the first step. The real defense against the impending destruction was still the hundreds of defense barriers and the defense formation itself. Cutting it off would allow the origin energy and chaos energy to ignore their existence to a large extent. However, if it intended to target them right from the start, they would just treat it as if he didn't say anything. Who knew what the Chaos Fiend's shadow was thinking? When the concept and the void were cut off, everyone felt the space blur for a moment. The scenery outside was distorted and returned to normal in an instant. If they tried to sense it again, they would feel that their senses had touched a barrier of extreme distance. It was as if the space they were in had shrunk from a vast continent to the size of the defense formation. At this moment, the defense formation space followed another set of rules that were almost the same as the void, but did not touch at all. This space is completely independent. What will happen to the original place? Jihan Xiao could not help but ask. Even at this moment, he still had the mind to figure out what had happened and what was about to happen. It's been replaced. The entire space with our traces has become an independent space, but we're still in the same place. Outside, there's a space that completely overlaps with this space, replacing the independent space that disappeared in an instant. Hui explained simply, you can think of it as us taking away a piece of space, and then that piece of space will restore itself to a complete state, returning to a normal space without any traces of our modification. Hui waved his hand and yelled at everyone. From now on, the defense array will enter a state of full defense. Follow the plan. maintain the stability of the rules and the temporary world core, and release the power of order to every part of the array through the ring of origin. Before he could finish his sentence, a strange feeling suddenly spread through everyone's hearts, causing everyone's expression to darken. Huey's expression stiffened as well. An incomparably huge and crazy energy swept through the defense array in an instant. Just a small part of the energy that penetrated through had already caused everyone to be in a weak negative state. This feeling was like being in a shallow beach, and when the seawater washed past the waist and abdomen, the feeling of floating away with the tide was born in their hearts. It was so weak that it was like an illusion, but it felt very real. Ka! The rotating ring of origin suddenly opened up to the outside, and a weak origin energy was released from it, permeating the entire space of the defense array. It propped up a simple layer of barrier, causing the impact of the raging chaotic energy on everyone through the barrier to weaken in an instant. Hui raised his head to look at the sky outside. In just a moment, endless darkness covered all cognition in this world. It has begun. It's less than 2 minutes away from the time we calculated. This is the real, chaotic energy that swept across the world. It's the real disaster that has been delayed for 2 months. Jihan Xiao and a group of people who rushed back at the last minute were sweating profusely. If they were really a step late, they might have experienced something in the darkness. An indescribable sense of destruction swept across the entire cloud continent along with the deepest darkness in this world. In an instant, the cloud continent was engulfed in an infinite speed, destroying the power of order that was set up in the concept level of the rules. After that, it rushed toward the lower continent in a frenzy. Everything happened in an instant, but most of the space that it came into contact with was only the void. The most important thing was that the space was desperately trying to reduce its sense of existence, making it difficult for it to discover its existence. 6 minutes. Hui suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze flickered and energy surged. He looked at everyone. In just 6 minutes, the entire black nest space has lost the power of order. There's only chaotic order left here. This is the domain of the chaotic void. Everyone's faces were filled with terror when they heard this. The entire outer space was filled with a manic aura that caused everyone to feel uneasy. It seemed that it was just as Hui had said. They had already completed their destruction and spread out evenly throughout the entire black nest space, completely occupying this space. Then they slowly calmed down, slowly, accumulating energy for the next turbulence. No one would have thought that the hundreds of billions of lives would be extinguished so quickly. In just 6 minutes, nothing was left. When the black nest space became completely true to its name, another energy that had been dormant for a long time also quickly moved. Almost when Hui and the others sensed that there was no longer any order in this space, and that there was only endless chaos and darkness left in the world, that energy appeared without any warning. It did not give anyone any time to react, and it instantly grabbed everyone's attention. In the complete darkness, the endless chaotic energy was like a thick layer of barrier that sealed the space. What they could see was actually a thick layer of chaotic energy that was close at hand. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in this world. It was unusually bright, mottled, and pure, just like the light emitted by Yun Nuashing that day. It was pure white, bright, and colorful, piercing through the darkness of the entire chaotic domain. Then, in an instant, it crazily expanded, bursting out from countless corners and from every inch of space, projecting the bright mottled white light in the entire chaotic domain. It was as if millions of suns had suddenly exploded in a dark night where there was no light at all. All they could see was an intense light that they could not look at directly, and it was so bright that it hurt their eyes. The earth quaked, and the mountains swayed from beneath their feet. The first wave of impact caused everyone to fall to the ground, prostrating themselves on all fours. Amidst the strong tremors, they felt as if the direction of gravity had suddenly become a little erratic, as if it was gradually deviating from its original direction. Hui forced himself to open his eyes and saw the truth of the matter. The dazzling flames of origin and chaos clashed all over the world, and the violent impact from all directions knocked their entire defensive formation around like a rubber ball. Although the complete blockade could allow them to be ignored as much as possible, the shock waves from the collision of energy were indiscriminate. Those bastards did not care whether they could see or not. They just bombarded indiscriminately, sweeping the entire space with the shock waves, covering every inch of space, and using absolute power to tear everything here apart. It was as if the defensive formation had experienced a million-magnitude earthquake and then was swept up by the tail of a tornado and fell heavily into the sea. It just so happened that it was caught in the tsunami of the earthquake and was swept in the endless sea by the tsunami and was pressed down by the waves. It stubbornly raised its head and then was pressed down into the sea again. We had almost lost count of how many times this cycle had happened. Anyway, every tremor, even the smallest tremor, was the proof that it was affected by the violent collision between the two giants. They were just the most innocent bystanders, swept up into the sky and down into the ground by the wind and waves. The origin energy released by the Ring of Origin supported the constantly shaking domain in the wind and rain, or at least it was absolutely isolated from the influence of the origin energy on the domain. As the Chaos Shadow said, the backup plan they left behind was still a way out for the lives of order. The opportunity to escape death was there, and whether they could fight for it or not was their own business. Looking at the current situation, they should be barely holding on to that slim chance of survival. Some kind of frantic sound resounded in the stormy world. It was not so clear because it coexisted with the wind and rain, but we still managed to recognize that it was different from the sound of two kinds of energy slapping each other and annihilating each other. It seemed to be a crazy roar mixed with concepts and rules. He had closed his eyes and waited for the wind and rain to stop, but this roar made him unable to suppress the curiosity in his heart. He opened his eyes, and then he almost fainted. In the space where endless white light shone, there was an extremely dense darkness that was releasing the deepest power of darkness and negative will in this world. The positions were completely reversed, and now it was the origin energy that occupied the entire domain, encircling and suppressing the chaos energy. In the place where the light was the most intense, he saw it. 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 He saw it become a giant that was thousands of miles tall. Half of its body turned into a thick fog, into a dark cloud. Everything was in the form of chaos, just like their name. That's their true form. We just took a glance and quickly turned his head away. He did not know if there would be any adverse effects if he stared at it for a long time. No, just like their name, just like their concept, they are concepts born from chaos and nothingness. They are chaos itself, and their forms can change at will. All kinds of incomprehensible phenomena, incomprehensible things. Anyway, there was nothing in the entire space that he could understand. Even if he was also in the primeval realm, he was just a little guy who had just entered the primeval realm. He might be one primeval realm away from the two big guys who were fighting each other outside. He knew it from the way it looked at him. It looked at him as if he was looking at grass and stones by the roadside. It did not see him as a human being at all. If it was not because it was a little interested in Maple, it might not even look at him. The shaking became more and more intense. He caught glimpses of the scene where the big guy and the origin energy were bombarding each other. He saw billions of chains cast by the origin energy entangling the giant and the thick fog. He saw the giant waving its fist and tearing the origin energy apart. This was probably the most exciting thing he had ever experienced in his life, and it was unlikely that there would be a scene that could surpass this in the future. This scene was engraved in his memory and witnessed by a large group of people who were trembling on the ground with their hands covering their heads. Is the fight over? The sudden calmness made Hui raise his head while trembling. He shook his head that was a little painful from shock and looked up at the space outside. Then he smiled bitterly. It was obvious that the battle was not over yet. It might have turned to the second stage. The dark clouds of chaos and the power of origin were intertwined. They seemed to be entangled, just like the scene of two suns colliding with each other. The energy light turned into streams of light and beams and scattered in the direction behind them. Even their bodies had broken into huge pieces and were thrown into the dark space. It was so heroic that it looked like they were going to perish together. However, Hui, who was an outsider, saw it clearly this time. He saw it clearly. The surging power of origin was like a giant claw of a palm, overlapping and holding the chaos in the palm. As the palm closed, the chaos and darkness in the entire space disappeared. Clang, a dull vibration accompanied by a substantial impact, came from all directions. Hui, who had just bent over and stood up, staggered and fell to the ground again. This time, it was not the movement of the two big guys fighting. He could feel the substantial concept and the feeling of the vibration of the laws. The black nest space was collapsing. That roar that was accompanied by endless destruction shook the entire space. The region where the origin energy was devouring the chaos energy suddenly expanded violently. The dazzling light turned it into a dazzling nebula. The expanding interior seemed to be giving birth to something. Little bits of black light appeared on the surface of the origin energy like motes of light. Just when Hui thought that the chaos shadow's resistance was so strong that even the origin energy could not suppress it, two dull sounds were heard. The origin energy trembled violently, and it sounded like it was having a stomachache. Then the entire nebula that had expanded by 3 to 4 times shrank back again. Countless chains of order emerged from the void along with the origin energy and wrapped around the nebula. All the origin energy floating in this space turned into streams of light and turned into countless chains engraved with mysterious divine runes. They pierced through the nebula and wrapped around the surface of a nebula, piercing it in the void. The other end of the chain pointed to the edge of the black nest. They wanted to completely annihilate it along with the black nest. They might even want to sweep it into the void, into nothingness. In the process of the endless energy turbulence, we felt that the void, rules, and order in this place were all rushing forward together with the endless energy. At first, he only saw that the energy had turned into pieces of tough scales covering the nebula, as if there was an extra layer of strange growth. As the energy surged faster and faster, everything in this space was rapidly shifting and pressing on that point. Finally, when everything of the black nest pressed on the nebula, layers of the nebula were bound in the tightest seal, turning it into a colorful cocoon of light. The energy of chaos could no longer be sensed. From the beginning of the energy surging, we had already lost the ability to sense the energy. At this moment, except for the huge cocoon of light in front of him, there was only an endless void left. We stood up calmly and got into the horse stance. This time, he really stood firmly and firmly. There shouldn't be any more explosions, right? There should be no more. Bang. Reality hit Hui hard in the head. He took 2 steps forward and was about to pick up the person when there was another loud rumble. This time, he didn't even use the horse stance. He fell on his back. He couldn't help but want to curse. F***CK. At percent, at the heavenly god of origins did it on purpose. It definitely did it on purpose. He roared inwardly in rage and helplessness as he fell on his back. The black nest space was pulled into countless tiny lines and abstract patterns of mixed colors, as well as meaningless clouds. The defensive array, which had struggled out of the billowing winds and waves, was suddenly dragged by a great force from 0 to who knows how many times faster than light in an instant, darting away from the nebula. Those lines and abstract patterns were probably remnants of things that once existed in this space. He preferred to call them the last words of the world's destruction. They would eventually be thrown into the void and destroyed. In the end, no one would notice the world that was destroyed. That's it. Everything here is over. Hui sat up and turned to look at the nebula. It was so fast that he could only vaguely see a cluster of blurry light fading away. Everything related to them was over. Its ending, its fate. Perhaps it would die this time, but it might crawl out again in the future. As the saying goes, if you can open a coffin and get out of it once, you can do sit-ups in the coffin again. Anyway, those things would not completely die. Sometimes, they might pop out in front of them to make their presence known. Whether he could see them again in this life. He hoped that he would not see them again in this life. It required great courage to meet them, and he had to be mentally prepared to die on the spot at any time. Those with high blood pressure or heart disease should not try to meet them, lest they break themselves just by looking at them. At the very center of the nebula, it slowly watched the hidden space fly away. Its gaze seemed to be sending off a new friend. It was not warm, not nostalgic, but there was a little interest. It's over this time. In the end, you guys are more skilled. I admit defeat. However, time is still long. Don't worry, he. It raised its head again and looked at the hidden space that could no longer be seen through the origin energy. Suddenly, it let out a faint laugh. If there is a chance in the future, we will definitely meet again. Little inheritor. Hee, I'll wait for that day to come. The roaring origin energy brought the entire space of the black nest to collapse towards the nebula, completely trapping the space in this space. Then, the void began to collapse. More origin energy tore a hideous crack in the void and swallowed the entire space in one gulp. The defensive array was thrown out of the black nest at an extreme speed. In a violent tremor, we felt that some of his 7 souls and 6 spirits might have been shaken off. The sudden disappearance of the speed made everyone tremble violently for a few times. Then, everything became quiet. Hui stood up and shook his head. He hurriedly looked ahead and caught up with the final scene. The gigantic sawtooth crack that pierced through the void was slowly closing after devouring the black nest space. There were colorful and dazzling white energies surging around the edges of the wound, healing the wound bit by bit and restoring it to the scene before everything had happened. Ugh, my head hurts. This Yuanshi realm body is about to fall apart. It was a pity that he had caught the scene, but had no time to pay attention to it. He really felt that 1 or 2 of his 7 souls and 6 spirits might have been missing. In the last part of the journey, that extreme acceleration and extreme deceleration made him feel uncomfortable all over. Did they deliberately not use the power of the natural order to adjust? The defensive array collapsed automatically as it reached its limit. From the outside to the inside, it collapsed layer by layer. Hundreds of layers of barriers completely disappeared in one go. In the end, only the ring of origin was still standing above their heads and slowly spinning. However, its light had completely dimmed. It was obvious that it had used up all its energy. It was already a very good result that it did not suddenly collapse and hit them when they were down. With the collapse of the defensive array, the void, order, and energy once again came into contact with them. We instantly felt that countless familiar reactions in the soul transmission had been activated. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. They had returned to the void of order. The journey to the black nest is over. No one is injured. Congratulations, congratulations. We breathed a long sigh of relief and fell back to the ground. There was a half bitter and half smile on his face. It seemed that they were not completely uninjured. Everyone had walked on the line of life and death. Maple had not woken up yet. However, they had returned to the void of order. For the time being, they did not have to be afraid that they would be crushed to death in the void in the next second. Only when they were truly out of the realm of chaos could they feel the comfortable feeling of relieving the weight of the entire Yuan realm. It was really cool. There was a layer of energy barrier left in the void that was more symbolic than practical. In fact, we could not find where the crack was torn open. He could only rely on his intuition to leave a barrier at the approximate location as a landmark, leaving a mark that something had happened here before. Although they had returned to the world of order, there was still a series of follow-up matters that needed to be dealt with. For example, Jihan Xiao and the others, and Jihan Xiao and the others. First, he had to find a place with good feng shui to settle down. As for the follow-up, this was a large group of high-level heavenly gods of origin. It It would be a lie to say that he was not tempted. After being freed from the weight of the great Yuan realm and returning to reality, they still had to face the bullsh asterisk T reality and begin to ponder over the situation in the world of order. He could not let go of this group of fresh troops in front of him. However, it was indeed not a very good time now, so he did not say anything. It was simply not divine to immediately grab strong men after escaping from a disaster. The turbulence here will be restored very soon. Jihan Shao smiled at Hui. At first glance, it looks terrible. In fact, the refuge has been reconstructed since the beginning. The progress now is not bad. TSK, what's the point of thinking so much? Let nature take its course for now. Hui laughed bitterly and waved his hand. Anyway, I'll find a place for you to settle down first. You still need to understand more about the void. After all, you all escaped from a prison. Forget it, we'll talk about this when the time comes. I'll let you all take your time first. The atmosphere that suddenly became heavy and dissipated made Jihan Shao scratch his head. Although he did not finish his sentence, he could roughly guess the situation. He laughed fearlessly. They were never afraid of challenges. If they could not move forward because of fear, they would have been annihilated along with the Cloud Continent. Except for the challenge that just ended. That was too difficult. That was really too difficult. It was not suitable for them. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.